Okay, it's 6 o'clock. We're going to reconvene our council meeting, and we'll ask our city clerk to call the roll again.
The record should reflect that all members are present with the exception of Councilmember O'Donnell.
We'll ask our city attorney, Walter Chung, to bring us out of closed session.
The City Council took no reportable action in closed session today.
Councilmember Green's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening.
If you could please stand up, put your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. To speak on an item on our agenda this evening, please fill out a speaker slip with the number of the item that you'd like to speak on. Give it to the clerk secretary's staff here at the dais. Speaker slips are available on the table just outside of the council chambers. For the members of the public that are participating via Zoom, you may raise your hand to indicate that you'd like to speak, or click the raise hand feature or press *9 on your phone. We'll announce when to raise your hand and to indicate that you'd like to make a comment on the specific item being discussed. Speakers will have 3 minutes each to address the city council. And that will bring us to our first oral communication opportunity. Any member of the public may address the council on agency-related matters that are not on the agenda by requesting to speak during this section of the agenda. If you are participating via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature now or press *9 if you'd like to speak. The number of speakers that will be heard during this segment is limited to 10. And the remaining speakers will be heard under our second oral communications item. Do we have any oral communications this evening? Seeing none, we'll move forward to our first discussion item, which is an update on the implementation of our homelessness strategic plan. And our Assistant City Manager, Imelda Huerta, will introduce this item.
Thank you, Mayor. It is our pleasure tonight to present another update on the implementation of the strategic plan to address homelessness. The strategic plan to address homelessness was adopted in March 2020 and identifies 3 goals to ensure. 3 goals are the prevention of homelessness, which focuses on the promotion of self-sufficiency and stable housing for people at risk of homelessness, the improvement of quality of life, focusing on providing meaningful resources to individuals experiencing homelessness and mitigating public health and safety impacts to all Vista residents, and the reduction of homelessness, which focuses on providing long-term solutions to connect people with appropriate housing and supportive services through trauma-informed and person-centered approaches that maintain the dignity and respect of every individual as they address their barriers to housing. In pursuit of these 3 goals, the strategic plan prescribes 7 strategies. While all strategies are recognized within each of the 3 goals, the strategies primarily serving the prevention and reduction of homelessness are housing retention, formerly the Homelessness Prevention Pilot Program, home share, securing of shelter beds, and social worker outreach. The strategies primarily serving to improve quality of life are encampment cleanup and governmental and legislative advocacy. The Homelessness Working Group strategy synthesizes the efforts of every strategy within the plan to ensure the cohesive delivery of strategic plan services to ultimately end homelessness. Mayor and City Council, it is my pleasure to introduce our Homeless Services Program Manager, Jonathan Lung, who will provide the update of the plan.
Thank you, Imelda. The strategic plan is funded by several funding sources, including federal, state, and local appropriations. These are the Encampment Resolution Funding Program, Round 1, or ERF1, granted by the California Interagency Council on Homelessness, Permanent Local Housing Allocation, or PLHA, granted by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, granted by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Successor agency funds as prescribed by the California Health and Safety Code, Section 34176.1, which allows up to $250,000 of housing successor funds to be used for homeless services annually. State budget earmark funding secured by Assembly Member Tasha Horvath and Senator Catherine Blakespear. American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funds, as appropriated by the U.S. Department of the Treasury, and year-end fund balances appropriations as approved by Vista City Council. To date, the strategic plan activities have contracted a total of $4.6 million which have included biological preserve area restoration and outreach, safe parking, citywide outreach and engagement, emergency shelter beds, and the former activities of a motel voucher program, home share coordination, and homelessness prevention pilot program. These contracts have expended just over $3 million. Since the last strategic plan update on June 1st, 2023, strategic plan funding has increased substantially by nearly $12 million, with $1.4 million of ARPA funding allocated towards a new housing assistance program, $5 million secured by Senator Catherine Blakespear for the upcoming Buena Creek Navigation Center, $4.5 million from the Vista year-end fund balance to acquire a homeless shelter, and $1 million also from Vista year-end fund balance to continue safe parking. Important updates that will be discussed tonight since the last strategic plan update on June 1st include the creation of 2 separate working groups from the previous internal homelessness working group, the continuation of the previous homelessness prevention pilot program as the Vista Emergency Housing Assistance Program, or VHAP, the development of the Buena Creek Navigation Center, the upcoming 2024 point in time count, and a proposed dashboard of outreach data for monthly updates to council. The formation of the Internal Homelessness Working Group with the adoption of the strategic plan was intended to promote better cooperation and coordination among city staff and departments, as well as staff education and development of innovative ideas to improve the delivery of city services related to homelessness. At the direction of City Council, various service providers operating in Vista, both contracted and not, have been included with recent meetings. The needs of local service providers and direct services were included with internal working group meetings, but the group began to lose sight of its original mission as prescribed by the strategic plan. As a result, the Internal Homelessness Working Group has been split to form 2 separate working groups. The Internal Homelessness Working Group is composed of the original city department representatives, including representatives of the Sheriff's Department COPS Unit and Caltrans. This group focuses primarily on coordinating efforts in support of the encampment cleanup and governmental and legislative advocacy strategies. The Vista Service Provider meeting includes various service providers operating in Vista, which include Exodus Recovery, Jewish Family Service, the Alliance for Regional Solutions, Alpha Project, Vista Unified School District, PATH, RTFH, and the County of San Diego. This group shares updates on activities in Vista, and upcoming meetings will also include case conferencing for service providers to identify and clarify clients' collateral care and any unmet needs between agencies. This group focuses primarily on coordinating efforts in support of the housing retention, home share, securing of shelter beds, and social worker outreach strategies of the strategic plan. Among other initiatives, these group meetings have resulted in 2 additional homeless resource fairs since the last strategic plan update. On August 18th, 2023, the city coordinated with the Public Defender's Office of the County of San Diego to host a homeless court pop-up event at the Vista Village Transit Center. In addition to resources provided for substance use rehab programs, child support services, county assessor for birth certificates, and DMV services, the homeless court pop-up events provide access to resources that clear critical barriers to someone addressing their homelessness, such as holds on driver's license or registrations, or fines and fees that prevent them from accessing needed services. At this homeless court pop-up event, the Health and Human Service Agency engaged with 89 individuals, 58 DMV services were administered, 41 court cases were addressed, and 26 showers were provided by Humanity Showers. On November 3rd, 2023, the City of Vista partnered with Humanity Showers during the regular outreach event at Calvary Chapel Vista. At this event, 40 lunches were provided to unsheltered residents, hundreds of articles of clothing were provided to participants, and 3 new clients were enrolled for services with the city's HOT team. Encampment cleanup efforts continue citywide, where between October 1st, 2022 and September 30th, 2023, 214 encampments were reported on private property, with 205 of those resolved by the property owners. During this same reporting period, 51 tons of trash were removed from public property, with 39 of them coming from the Hacienda BPO area. Through the outreach efforts in the Hacienda BPO, 106 individuals were engaged for the first time by outreach workers, with 27 of those individuals placed into either shelter or housing. The current housing retention strategy of the strategic plan was adopted originally as the Homelessness Prevention Pilot Program. The pilot program was administered between August 2020 and August 2022, and provided $334,000 to prevent 294 Vista residents in 96 households from losing their housing. This program provided up to 3 months of rental assistance up to $5,000 and had exhausted all funding by August 2022. At the last strategic plan update, City Council directed staff to create an ongoing program, and the Vista Emergency Housing Assistance Program, or VHAP, was created with the reallocation of $1.4 million of unused ARPA funds. The VHAP will provide up to 6 months of assistance up to $10,000 to Vista households who make 65% area median income or less at risk of losing their housing with rental, mortgage, and utility assistance, including arrears, and legal aid and education to provide housing stabilization. An RFP was published to solicit an administrator of the program, but received no proposals. The city is currently soliciting administrators through an informal bid process, and 2 proposals have been received. Staff will announce the award of the contract to the selected service provider on Monday, December 11th, and will return to City Council to recommend a contract at the January 9th, 2024 City Council meeting. The home share strategy of the strategic plan matches individuals experiencing homelessness with others experiencing the same as housemates. Home share expands affordable housing costs without the need to construct new units and naturally reduces living costs by sharing rental costs between multiple roommates. Home share is a critical function of homeless services, particularly in high housing cost areas like Southern California. The 2024 HUD fair market rents for zip code 92084 starts at $1,880 for an efficiency unit and increases to $4,220 for a 4-bedroom unit. The city previously contracted with Elder Help of San Diego between November 2020 and July 2023 and is currently considering a new provider for the home share strategy. Townspeople, a nonprofit based in San Diego, currently administers their San Diego Shared Housing Collaborative throughout San Diego County, which provides an online portal for individuals experiencing homelessness to identify potential housemates based on shared interests, lifestyles, and compatibility criteria included in their profile. Townspeople will facilitate meetups to introduce matched clients as potential housemates and identify housing opportunities for those matches. Staff met with townspeople to discuss a potential partnership to provide these services at a higher level specifically in Vista, and a proposal for Vista-specific program was submitted to staff. Staff used this proposal to apply for funding through the RTFH's SuperNOFO, which is a simplified grant application process that streamlines guidelines, applications, and multiple sources of funding into a single application. The SuperNOFO closed on October 31st, 2023, and the submitted application included a 2-year program which totaled just over $1 million. Last week, RTFH notified staff that the proposal was deferred for additional information and discussion, and a follow-up meeting to discuss the program with RTFH is pending. The provision of shelter beds for Vista's unsheltered neighbors was provided by contract during the first 3 years of the strategic plan with Interfaith Community Services for beds within the Alliance for Regional Solutions Shelter Network, which includes Haven House in Escondido, La Posada in Carlsbad, Operation Hope North County in Vista, and a rotational winter shelter in the coastal and inland regions of North San Diego County. Between October 1st, 2022 and September 30th, 2023, 56 individuals stayed for a total of 3,020 nights of shelter, of which 8 have found permanent housing. Recently, Interfaith Community Services opened a new low-barrier family shelter in Escondido, which can accommodate 10 to 13 families with 36 beds and is included in the Alliance Shelter Network. Additionally, at the September 26, 2023 City Council meeting, City Council approved a restructured contract with Interfaith for shelter beds in the Alliance Network, which reimburses the Alliance for actual shelter bed nights utilized. The contract also requires a daily shelter bed availability notification, which has been provided by a Google Doc with daily updates from each shelter and reasons for failed intakes referred by the city or its contractors. The upcoming Buena Creek Navigation Center, or BCNC, will also provide additional shelter beds in support of the strategic plan. This project will be jointly funded by the cities of Vista and Encinitas, with 18 non-congregate units allocated to Vista and 6 to Encinitas. With each room having the ability to accommodate couples, the city of Vista will have an additional 36 beds available to provide shelter for Vista residents experiencing homelessness. 3 years of operations for Vista will be funded by state earmark funding secured by Senator Catherine Blakespear, and will also have the ability to accommodate pets and store personal property on site. On September 26, 2023, City Council approved a master lease for the BCNC properties and an RFP to solicit an operator. The execution of the master lease is contingent on a building inspection and termite report in line with a Section 1 clearance, both of which delayed the original implementation timeline by 8 weeks and are expected to be complete by Monday, December 11th, 2023. The RFP for the BCNC operator closed on November 29th, 2023, and Vista staff are working with Encinitas staff to review proposal submissions. Notification of selection and award of the operator will occur on December 21st, 2023, with a contract recommended to Vista City Council on January 9th, 2023. Upon approval of the operator contract, program implementation and site preparation is anticipated to take 6 to 8 weeks, which will include the purchase and installation of furniture and security system equipment and hiring of the operator's program staff. The BCNC is expected to become operational and taking clients in late February or early March 2024. Shelter is also provided with the Safe Parking Program, which opened on August 18th, 2023. This program is hosted on the Eucalyptus lot of Vista Civic Center and can accommodate up to 25 vehicles and operates from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. daily with security on site during all program hours. Recent changes to the program includes the barricading of the lot at the 2 lot driveways to Eucalyptus Avenue from 11:30 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. to prevent unauthorized parking overnight as posted by signage on the lot. In addition, $1 million from year-end fund balance was approved by City Council at the November 14th, 2023 City Council meeting to continue the program beyond the first year. Now I'd like to invite Nicole McCune, Jewish Family Service Director of Safe Parking, to share accomplishments from the Vista Safe Parking Program.
Good evening, thank you. Move the slide forward, please. Do I have access to it? You have it. Thank you. Our purpose at Jewish Family Service is to partner with
Get as
people.
close to the microphone as you can.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me better?
Yes.
Thank you. Our purpose at Jewish Family Service is to partner with people of all backgrounds to build stable and dignified lives. Together, we create a stronger and healthier community where everyone can thrive. Oops, excuse me. Safe Parking is an early intervention program providing individuals and families experiencing homelessness a safe place to sleep at night, including case management services to support their transition to permanent, stable housing. We're intervening at a crucial time. They have lost their housing, but they still have a valuable asset in their vehicle, and they can get to work, school, and do the things that they need to do. We offer a comprehensive program with individualized support. Excuse me. Our hours of operation are 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. daily. We have a 25 vehicle capacity. We offer case management services, including comprehensive budgets and assessments with a focus on income and housing stability. We have security on site during all program hours. We offer client-centered services, including access to medical care, partnering with a medical mobile unit, access to small car repairs, and also help with financial assistance to stay current on registration. We provide housing search assistance. We identify market rate housing, low-income housing, senior housing, and help with Section 8 and other subsidies. We also provide tangibles like gas cards to get to job appointments or medical appointments. Resource navigation, including help with accessing benefit identity documents such as Social Security card, help with employment, job coaching, resume. We also have food access on site, providing a small pantry, and we also partner to help with CalFresh. We also help with budgeting, financial consciousness, and literacy, improving credit score, and whatever is needed for the individual. We also help with benefits screening, so CalFresh, CalWorks, General Relief, whatever may be available to them. To date, from August 18th to October 31st, we've served 35 individuals. We've had 44 positive exits, with the average time to a positive exit to be 17 days. 22 of those positive exits, 22%, have exited to permanent housing, which includes market rate and also Section 8 and other subsidies. 22% have reunified with family. Our negative exit breakdown, 50% of individuals exited to a place not meant for habitation. Most of those folks were still living in their car, but in other areas, and 6% were unknown. So we've had, just in the few months that we've operated, a couple success stories. We had an individual working full-time, and he was in between housing. He was able to stay and have a safe place to park, and case managers helped him to identify a market rate housing. We also helped a family regain full-time employment, assisted them with budgeting, and also help for a Section 8 housing subsidy. Our demographics, 18% are minors under the, or excuse me, 8% are 18 or younger, 60% were age 18 to 54, and 32% were over 55. This is a little bit different than what we see at our other sites. Our biggest population is usually seniors over 55. Veteran status, 26 identified as veterans, 31 identified as disabled. 52 of our participants were homeless for less than 1 year, and 37% identified as male, 63% identifying as female. 8% were families with minors. Our top referral sources were self-referral, so Google searches or media have led them there. 211 was next, followed by McAllister. Friends or family referring them. One Safe Place, the DA's office, Brother Benno's, Vista Library, and most recently we had 2 referrals from a local college. This is a little preview of a monthly dashboard that will come out, and we will break down number of new enrollments monthly by households and individuals, negative, positive exits, also level of educational attainment, age demographics, veteran status, and then households with minors and the number of minors within that household. We analyzed the calls for service and crime reports within a 1-mile radius of the Civic Center. From April 1st to July 31st, there were 3,337 calls for service and 676 crime reports. During our program operation, August to November 21st, those calls for service went down to 2,983, and crime reports went down to 590. We did get this information from the Sheriff's Department. And you can see by month, the calls for service trending down quite significantly, as well as the crime reports by month. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Okay, staff continues to monitor federal, state, and local legislation and funding opportunities in alignment with the strategic plan. Recent legislative bills signed into law include California Assembly Bill 12, California Senate Bill 567, and California Senate Bill 43. Additionally, a delegation of federal representatives from San Diego submitted a letter to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to urge the revision of the Continuum of Care funding calculation, and the 2024 point-in-time count has been scheduled for January 25th, 2024. California Assembly Bill was signed into law on October 11th, 2023, and limits the security deposit landlords are able to charge new tenants to 1 month's rent. Limited income and high security deposit costs continue to be one of the largest barriers for low-income families and individuals experiencing homelessness from obtaining permanent housing. Exceptions are included for small landlords with 2 or fewer properties with no more than 4 units collectively, and landlords may still seek damages from tenants responsible for damages beyond the security deposit total. AB 12 becomes effective on July 1st, 2024. California Senate Bill 567 was signed into law on September 30th, 2023, and provides additional tenant protections for no-fault just cause evictions. Owners evicting tenants for the purpose of occupying the residence themselves or by a family member must occupy the residence for a minimum of 12 consecutive months as their primary residence. Evictions for demolition or substantial remodel must be described in detail, and permits for the demolition or substantial remodel must be provided to the tenant. SB 567 becomes effective on April 1st, 2024. California Senate Bill 43 was signed into law on October 10th, 2023, and expands the definition of gravely disabled to include severe substance use disorder and the inability to provide for one's personal safety and necessary medical care when placing an individual to an involuntary mental health hold, more commonly known as a 5150 hold. Expert witness statements will also be admissible in court, which were previously disallowed as hearsay. SB 43 becomes effective on January 1st, 2024, but counties may defer implementation until January 1st, 2026. On Tuesday, December 5th, 2023, the County of San Diego Board of Supervisors voted 3-2 to delay the implementation of SB 43 in San Diego to January 1st, 2025. A letter dated October 24th, 2023 was sent by a San Diego delegation of federal representatives to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which urges the reevaluation of the Continuum of Care, or COC, funding allocation formula. COC funding allocations are based on the CDBG formula that was developed in 1977 and favors factors like age of housing. The San Diego region has the nation's 8th largest homeless population, but receives only the 14th highest level of funding. The delegation believes that changing the CDBG COC allocation methodology would make sense, however, would create a massive redistribution of federal funds that would be politically contentious. Staff will continue to monitor any developments from this effort. On January 25th, 2024, the annual point-in-time count will be held to conduct a homeless count as mandated by HUD. The point-in-time count collects data on the number of people experiencing homelessness on a particular night, which is used for reporting and funding opportunities at all levels of government. The 2024 point-in-time count in Vista will be held from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. and is seeking volunteers to conduct the count. Any member of the public is welcome to participate, and interested parties should visit the Regional Task Force on Homelessness's website to register for the count. New for this year will be an additional safe parking count that the RTFH will be coordinating with lot operators to include safe parking programs with the count. During the 2023 point-in-time count, 119 individuals experiencing homelessness in Vista were counted, which was a 16% increase from 2022. Next is a discussion of the outreach and direct services provided by Exodus Recovery with the social worker outreach strategy of the strategic plan. We'll begin this discussion with operational definitions. Outreach and engagement, or O&E, is the phase which is initiated from the date that the outreach team first attempts contact with the client. These contacts may be conducted during street outreach, at a clinic, hospital, office, or residence. In O&E, HOT works with community service providers to connect clients to needed services and resources, including shelter referral, and offer enrollment for services. Enrollment begins when a client deliberately provides consent to participation in ongoing case management services in writing. Once enrolled into services, a case plan is created based on the client's individual service needs. Only in the enrollment phase can a client be referred to the housing navigation team for housing services and direct services such as rental assistance through Exodus Recovery. A contact is defined as any interaction in person, by telephone, including calls or text message, or by email between Exodus staff and the client. Eligibility for services with Exodus Recovery includes individuals 18 or older, or families with minor children that are homeless or at imminent risk of homelessness, and have ties to Vista with at least 50% of residency and or employment within Vista, or became homeless in Vista. Individuals and families are at imminent risk of homelessness when their residence will be lost within 14 days of the date of contact for homeless assistance. No subsequent residence has been identified, and the individual or family lacks resources or support networks needed to obtain other permanent housing. Shelter referrals begin when a client accepts a shelter bed offer during outreach or after enrollment. Clients are transported to shelter facilities as necessary. If all appropriate shelters are full, a referral is still provided to the shelter for intake when a bed does become available. Shelter referrals do not guarantee shelter intake. During the first 3 program years of the agreement with Exodus, 196 clients were referred to Exodus for the first time, 207 during year 2 for the first time, and 289 during the 3rd year for the first time. Of these individuals, 156 clients enrolled for services during year 1, 110 during year 2, and 135 during year 3. Referral sources include unscheduled outreach performed by Exodus staff, regularly scheduled outreach with the Sheriff's Department, City of Vista, client self-referrals, other community partners, and Caltrans. Total contacts continue to increase each year as the need for homeless services rises, and Exodus becomes increasingly established in the community with a total of 1,030 total contacts during year 1, 2,815 during year 2, and 5,414 during year 3. Between October 1st, 2022 and September 30th, 2023, 27 households enrolled with Exodus Recovery were placed into permanent housing using emergency housing vouchers, rapid rehousing vouchers, a local rent supplement voucher, rental assistance administered by Exodus Recovery, and a family reunification program voucher. A total of 124 adult individuals have been housed since program inception. During the same reporting period, 167 clients received 853 referrals for benefits navigation, with the most common benefits being connected to a free cell phone provider, referral to food banks, and CalFresh referral. 179 offers for shelter were provided to 104 individuals during this period, with 70% of referrals for shelter being accepted by the client and 30% declined by the client. Clients were offered a shelter bed between 1 and 9 times, with an average of 2 offers per client. The most common reasons for declining shelter include tuberculosis testing for intake to Haven House, displacement from support systems and family, separation from pets, unpleasant or traumatic past experience at shelters, and lack of storage for personal belongings. It should be noted that these reasons are not ranked, and clients may give multiple reasons for declining shelter. Exodus Recovery also administered motel vouchers through the Encampment Resolution Funding Program and provided vouchers for 14 families containing 20 adults and 7 children. The average cost per household for this program was $3,100. Median cost per night was $150, and the average length of stay was 11.5 nights. All 14 of these families assisted with motel vouchers have since moved into permanent housing. $171,000 in rental assistance was also administered by Exodus Recovery during this past program year to assist 14 households with obtaining housing, with an average assistance of $12,000 per household. These 14 households contain 17 adults and 35 children. Staff has also been working with Exodus Recovery to develop a monthly dashboard to provide updates to council. This slide demonstrates the proposed dashboard for council's consideration and feedback, which was also provided to council before tonight's meeting. Please note that the data provided on this slide is mock data only, and staff is soliciting feedback on the format and reporting metrics of the dashboard. Finally, I'd like to invite Elizabeth Galorio, Exodus Recovery Program Director of Vista Programs, to share one client's journey to obtaining housing.
Good evening, Mayor Franklin, City Council members. For this portion of the presentation, I'd like to pivot and talk about the person. Tonight, I'm thrilled to take you on a journey that embodies the impactful work of our homeless outreach team. I'll be shining a spotlight on a remarkable success story showcasing the client's transformative journey from homelessness to stable housing. As we delve into this portion of the presentation, I hope that you all will gain insights into the tireless efforts and crucial roles played by our dedicated outreach team, So let's begin this exploration of hope, resilience, and community collaboration. I'd like to introduce you to John. John, a 65-year-old veteran, came to the attention of the City of Vista Homeless Outreach Team with a complex history. He faced challenges related to mental health, chronic physical conditions, and substance use. Following his service in Vietnam, John grappled with PTSD. At that time, PTSD had not been clinically recognized, resulting in a lack of appropriate mental health treatments, and this absence of care contributed to his dependency on substances as a coping mechanism for PTSD. When the City of Vista Homeless Outreach Team first encountered John in the Hacienda BPO zone, Preserve Overlay Zone in February 2021, it was apparent that he had previous interactions with outreach teams or providers. His lack of trust and minimal engagement served as a clear demonstration of his previous experience with outreach. Despite losing his traditional housing 3 decades ago, Vista held a sense of home for him, providing shelter, safety, and connection with his chosen family among those sharing the streets. Typically, once a referral is received, Vista Hot's initial protocol is the involvement of our community health worker who conducts a thorough screening of the client. This initial outreach serves to assess eligibility. In John's case, a thorough in-person screening had already been conducted, leading to the immediate initiation of a referral to Vista Hot. During this initial engagement period, a fundamental aspect of our work that underpins the success of our client interactions is building rapport. Establishing a strong connection during initial engagement is not just a courtesy, it's the cornerstone of trust. In this instance, trust created space for John to share his personal narrative. These genuine connections between our team and the clients empower us to better understand, support, and guide our clients on their unique journey. Establishing rapport is crucial as outreach and engagement should transcend mere transactions. Upon confirming eligibility, John was successfully enrolled in the program. Subsequently, the next step involved conducting a comprehensive assessment of John's specific needs. When asked to identify barriers to securing housing, John reported it was primarily due to a lack of sufficient income to pay for housing. Dependent on his SSDI benefits, he struggled to cover the various application fees, credit checks, security deposit, and the first month's rent, in addition to meeting his basic needs. Through a thorough needs assessment and care planning, our team identified crucial gaps and connected him with resources, such as the Social Security Administration, to pursue a redetermination of his benefits. Unfortunately, due to chronic disabilities, he would not be able to return to work and had been out of the workforce long enough that he did not qualify for an increase in benefits. During our team's initial contacts with John, a shelter bed was offered. John declined due to unwillingness to abandon his friends at the encampment site. Often, finding the intricate balance between providing shelter and respecting the importance of existing support systems is an area that our team must navigate. Sorry. During this initial enrollment period, John prioritized securing shared housing with his best friend from the encampment. Fortunately, a housing opportunity arose through Veterans Village, and given John's eligibility as a veteran, an arrangement was made to accommodate both him and his friend. While a referral to a men's shelter was presented as an alternative in the interim, John declined due to concerns about the limited storage capacity for personal items at the shelter. On the day of the intake into Veterans Villages 1 week later, the team facilitated transportation to ease the transition. The team made efforts to pick him up from a designated location, contact his phone, and tried to locate him at the encampment. However, despite their efforts, the team lost contact with him, impeding the ability to locate him. The declined shelter option and subsequent loss of contact posed challenges to ensuring John's stable housing. John lost his opportunity with Veterans Village shortly thereafter. The team conducted street outreach and established collateral contacts with hospitals, diligently striving to locate John and ensure his well-being. Community-based outreach services are intended to meet people where they are at physically, emotionally, and mentally. But meeting this population where they are at physically can be difficult due to the transient nature of homelessness and a person's lack of stable shelter to be located consistently. Government-provided cell phones can be helpful. However, access to charging facilities is limited, and the lack of a stable power source poses a significant challenge. Unfortunately, these phones are susceptible to theft or loss, exacerbating the challenges faced by individuals in vulnerable situations. In the case of John, the absence of a functioning phone hindered our team's ability to contact him. The process to obtain a government-provided cell phone poses additional barriers, as potential recipients are required to provide proof of identification in the form of a government photo ID, as well as proof that they are receiving government benefits such as CalFresh or Medi-Cal. According to the Department of Motor Vehicles, it can take up to 60 days for someone to receive their photo ID in the mail from the time of their initial appointment, as long as the individual has had one in that state before. Forms of identification, including Medi-Cal beneficiary card, photo ID, Social Security, and birth certificate belonging to persons experiencing homelessness, are often lost or stolen. Care coordination, accessing necessary services, and even obtaining basic documents and ID involve a time-consuming process. Several steps must be considered before reaching completion and moving on to the next stage of care planning. The waiting period between engagements often leads to a loss of contact with clients, and this entire process might persist or restart through multiple periods of engagement, adding complexity to the overall journey. When the outreach worker encountered John again nearly 2 months later, in August, efforts to secure permanent housing were discussed. Shelter services were revisited and declined, as John was adamant about pursuing permanent housing instead of a temporary shelter. So far, by this time, John had declined shelter on 3 separate occasions, citing reasons such as unwillingness to abandon friends, limited storage space, and a preference for permanent housing over temporary shelter. Unfortunately, the outreach team lost contact with John following this encounter, and due to the inability to consistently locate John in person or by phone, he was closed out to services several months later. In January of 2022, the outreach worker located John during a scheduled outreach event with law enforcement in the Hacienda BPO. John re-enrolled to Vista Hot Services for the second time, prompting the initiation of a new screening, new assessment, and new care planning period to identify his current service needs. John was found to be in poor physical condition as a result of an injury as well as untreated medical conditions, and agreed to the outreach worker calling emergency medical services for treatment. Third-party reports by individuals residing in nearby encampments expressed concerns for John's diminished mental capacity and ability to complete activities of daily living. Following John's brief hospitalization, the outreach worker assisted him in scheduling a follow-up appointment approximately 3 weeks later with his primary care physician. In an effort to honor his autonomy, the outreach worker supported John's decision to complete the appointment on his own. In February through March of 2022, as John continues to recover following his hospitalization, he communicated that he was ready to pursue housing and was placed in a local motel funded and facilitated by the outreach program to serve as bridge housing. John remained in Bridge Housing for approximately 3 weeks and was authorized an extension at another partnered motel in Escondido while waiting for a housing opportunity in San Diego. Due to his mobility limitations, he declined the extension, reporting that he did not want to relocate to Escondido for Bridge Housing or to San Diego for permanent housing, as it would significantly limit his ability to visit with his primary support system, all of whom were located in Vista. In June of 2022, the Housing Navigator identified a potential housing opportunity at an independent living facility, and with John's consent, scheduled a tour. On the day of the tour, the Housing Navigator transported John to Brother Benno's, where he was able to access a shower, obtain clean clothes, and get a meal before the tour. Persons experiencing homelessness are hyper aware of how challenges to access basic hygiene services negatively impact how others treat them. The services that Brother Benno's was able to provide aligned with the National Association of Social Workers' ethical principles to help clients in need and address social problems, as well as respecting their inherent dignity and worth of a client by providing a basic needs service that allowed John to feel more confident and dignified in how he presented to the property manager. The tour resulted in a confirmed move-in date for the end of June, and he opted to remain in his encampment close to his support system until then. Unfortunately, it was during this time period that John's best friend at the encampment passed away. The outreach team offered emotional support, and he was provided Bridge Housing to ensure a safe space for addressing his emotional needs while awaiting ILF placement. On the move-in day, John expressed anxiety about moving into the ILF. Using a person-centered, trauma-informed approach, the outreach team utilized motivational interviewing skills to support him in exploring his motivation for change, ultimately resulting in him making the independent decision to commit to housing. Over the next month, John continued to struggle with adapting to his new environment, often reporting that his home was in the Hacienda BPO, or the jungle, as people experiencing homelessness in this area refer to it. It is not unusual for people exiting homelessness to struggle with adapting to their new home. This is one of the reasons that Vista Hot maintains contact after they are housed. Both Vista Hot case managers and housing navigators provide support and services to help the person maintain housing and continue to progress toward their personalized goals. Services may include creating a housing stability plan, budgeting, early intervention for behaviors that jeopardize housing, basic skills training such as housekeeping and conflict resolution, training on tenant and landlord rights and responsibilities, assisting in resolving disputes with landlords and neighbors, and provide support related to lease compliance and household management. In July of 2022, John presented with worsening cognitive decline and reestablished care with his primary care physician with the assistance of the outreach team. This resulted in referrals to different specialists. Our team provided assistance with transportation, facilitated contacts with service providers, and even took the initiative to pick up John's medications from the pharmacy. Now that John had stable housing, it was easier to locate him and address his medical conditions, knowing that he would have a safe place to recuperate and manage those conditions with appropriate follow-up care. Unlike a treatment-first approach, the Housing First model is a person-centered approach that does not enforce contingencies such as treatment or sobriety in order to access housing, and has been attributed to a significant decrease in the amount of time spent and a stark improvement, amount of time spent homeless, and a stark improvement in long-term housing stability. In John's case, he was able to maintain all of his medical appointments over the next few months, and his condition steadily improved. While John's physical and mental baselines improved, he still struggled with memory issues, as evidenced by little to no recollection of how his monthly SSDI benefits were being spent. Money management challenges were not disclosed by him previously. This had a negative effect on his housing status when he was unable to pay his rent in full in July and August of 2022. The program provided short-term rental assistance as a temporary solution to prevent John from returning to homelessness. In August of 2022, the outreach team helped connect John to a payee service to manage his monthly income that would mitigate future concerns over how his funds were being spent. After 3 months of residing in the ILF, John shared with our team that he finally felt at home and did not feel compelled to return to living in the jungle. The outreach team continued to assist John in purchasing basic need items such as clothing, food, and hygiene supplies as needed due to the majority of his monthly income going towards his rent, leaving him with little discretionary funds. Securing housing was merely the beginning of John's journey, and the outreach team continued to provide case management services, including support with medical appointments, transportation as needed, and procurement of basic needs. In January of 2023, the outreach team reassessed John's needs and discussed a referral to PACE, which is a program for all-inclusive care for the elderly. The PACE model focuses on providing comprehensive care at all levels, including preventative, primary, acute, and long-term, to help older adults maintain their independence and remain in their homes as long as possible. During the 36 days from when the PACE referral was submitted to his official service enrollment, the outreach team continued to provide case management services, including coordinating care with medical providers and transportation to medical appointments. In March of 2023, John began working with PACE, and PACE helped relocate him to an assisted living facility in May to meet the level of care needed for improving his quality of life. Presently, our team provides ongoing case management and housing navigation as needed. Stability transcends a weekly check-in. It involves ensuring the client can seamlessly integrate into society with their most basic needs effectively met. Where's the last slide? Okay. This presentation illustrates the intricate and nonlinear trajectory of John's transitioning from homelessness to self-sufficiency and stabilization. His journey is marked with a series of successes and challenges, demanding unwavering perseverance and dedication from both the client and the support team. The path from homelessness to stability is not a straightforward one. Rather, it resembles a winding road with twists and turns. Understanding this journey requires a holistic view that considers the complexities and dynamic nature of the process. Our clients experience various milestones on their journey. Success is often a collaborative effort. Flexibility in support strategies is essential, and Vista Hot must also adapt interventions based on evolving needs. Tailoring support to address specific changes ensures a more effective and personalized approach. Since John's initial engagement in February of 2021 in the Hacienda BPO to the May 2023 admission to a long-term assisted living facility, where he continues to successfully reside with no financial assistance from the City of Vista, the outreach team recorded 112 direct client contacts, totaling 84 contact hours to assist John to leave the cycle of homelessness. In addition, the outreach team made 76 collateral contacts, totaling 21 collateral hours, and 23 referrals to services. 48% were successful. The program allocated a total of $4,035 to fund bridge housing and rental assistance, facilitating the crucial steps towards securing permanent housing. John overcame barriers, big and small, to define statistics and has been able to maintain his permanent housing since June of 2022. And while he has expressed his gratitude for the support of PACE and the City of Vista Homeless Outreach Team, it is John's intentional decision-making and perseverance that deserves the spotlight. Nevertheless, the outreach team's pivotal role in the client's success cannot be overstated. Beyond mere term outreach, their dedication is key. Case management from initial engagement underscores wraparound services. Housing navigation extends beyond finding shelter, rebuilding trust for those let down by providers, and preventing homelessness in at-risk individuals. In this tough housing market, our housing navigators have evolved into somewhat of our real estate experts, while our outreach workers wear multiple hats as counselors, case managers, and advocates in their own right. The team's multifaceted efforts are the basis of our impactful work and mission. Today, John's mental and overall health have shown significant improvement, with housing playing an important role in initiating the healing process for him. Notably, he has undergone a recent procedure to receive a new heart valve, indicating a focus on his physical well-being. Additionally, his current involvement in a relationship with his new girlfriend suggests positive social connections, contributing to his overall well-rounded health. And finally, I'll conclude with this uplifting quote from one of the leading experts in people experiencing homelessness. And I quote, "People do best when they have somewhere to live, something to do, and someone to love." Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. That concludes staff's presentation. We're available for any questions.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation and very moving account of John's experience. Councilmember Joe Green.
Do we have any
Oh,
speakers
I'm
right
sorry,
now?
we do have a public speaker. Thank you very much. Jim Riggenbach, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Jim Ringenbach. I'm a Vista resident. So in January, the mayor gave a State of the City presentation at a $95 a plate luncheon that featured a 22-minute video. And in the section about the city's homelessness work, he stated, "Drug addiction and mental illness are preventing the majority of the people we come into contact with from accepting the services we're offering." I might have missed it, but I didn't notice that data point in Mr. Lung's report. I'm hoping either I can be correct that if I missed it, if I happen to miss it, or if the mayor's statement can be verified. I think there's no doubt that there are people in the street with severe mental illness who need intervention, possibly forced intervention, but to know how many resources to apply to this population requires knowing exactly how deep that particular issue is. So I hope to hear some clarification on this topic. And finally, I just want to thank the city staff for all their work, and especially thank all the service providers who are out on the street doing this important and difficult work. Thank you.
Councilmember Green.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And again, thank you so much to staff, and thank you to all the service providers who are here tonight to give updates on what they were doing. As we went along, I just kind of have a list of questions, so I'm just going to kind of try to knock them out one by one. First question has to do with the Alliance Network Interfaith. We changed the way we pay for beds to where we do a pay per bed, type of transaction with them. How has that gone? Have we received our first bill for beds? And has the amount of beds that we've been receiving increased since our last meeting?
So we've received our first report for the month of October, which is the start of the new contract. Most of the charges were for the upfront administrative costs, but the amount of beds utilized remains relatively consistent with previous reports.
Okay. And as far as what our monthly cost was, I think that we had a $200,000, something like that, contract with them. What did our October monthly costs come in at?
I don't have that in front of me, but I can certainly follow
Yeah,
up.
please, just let me know, because I'm trying to figure out from a fiscal responsibility standpoint, are we saving taxpayers money every single month? So that would be good. So how many beds did we get? What did we pay? And what was our monthly thing? From a home share standpoint, I know that we spoke about discontinuing our contract with Elder Help because of their poor placement, stats. Townspeople who you spoke about, have we looked at their placement numbers and what their placement rate is like? Like how many current home share members do they have? And is there a waiting list currently? Do they have people in our area who already want to share their home? Or are those all things that with this new contract, they're going to be providing information on to us?
So they're still a very new initiative. They just launched their website, I believe, a month ago or so, which is still kind of in the testing phase. They have sent some invitations, so there isn't any current information available yet on their accomplishments yet.
So have they had any success with home share at all in the past, just from a data standpoint in other areas?
I don't know, but they are the ones that I can share the proposal with the council.
Okay, I definitely like to see that because I just don't want to keep throwing money at a home share program that also doesn't have results, and I don't want to be the startup for every failed home share program out there. You know what I mean? And I feel like we definitely allocated a good amount of funds towards that with lacking results. So that's that. Next one I want to talk about was the Buena Creek Navigation Center. And I know that as a council, we required a inspection and a Section 1 termite clearance, which I know kind of pushed back the actual opening of the center. When that inspection was done, I obviously didn't have a chance to go over an inspection if it was provided to me. But with the Section 1 termite clearance, did they actually fumigate the property, or was it just a local treatment of the structure?
It was fully fumigated, and we ordered a termite inspection, and the inspector came and saw that it was fumigated with a warranty.
Fantastic.
And saw that there was no need for an additional, inspection.
That was a big thing for us as the council when we talked about quality of life, and at least when we take it over, make sure there's no bugs in the place, and that we can provide a nice, clean, safe environment for the people who are occupying there. The other thing that you stated is that by December 12th, we were going to be selecting the provider. That's when we're going to actually determine who we're going to, be the servicer there, and that within 6 to 8 weeks from that, we should be able to have it furnished and opened up. I think you gave us a date of mid-February. Does that sound correct?
So it's 6 to 8 weeks from the approval of the contract, which council would approve on January 9th.
Okay, so I had that down too. So we're ratifying the contract on January 9th, 2023, and then our anticipated, or 2024, but our anticipated opening is still February of 2024, even with that. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Next one has to do with safe parking and Jewish Family Services. Thank you so much for being here. I really just wanted to thank you for your explanation of wraparound services. Councilmember Melendez actually brought this forward a while ago when we ended up, implementing the safe parking, and we visited one in Encinitas. I actually visited with the mayor. And just from a wraparound services standpoint, the amount of improvements to wraparound services, additional services that weren't even in place when we signed this contract, is really cool. So I was super glad to hear about that. One thing that I had a question on was on the negative exits. We talked about how we had, I don't know if it was 50% negative exits or whatever the number was. My question on the exits are those exits due to the length of stay constraints? Like, are we pushing them out and saying, hey, goodbye, or is it just they leave on their own?
They leave on their own. Yeah, no, we're not pushing them out. It's up to them. They've decided that they wanted to exit for various reasons and still abide in their cars.
Okay.
Sometimes it's support networks or moving to a different area.
Okay. And do they typically have to give notice before they exit the program? What's that like for you guys?
We do ask folks to check in with us for any length of stay that's away from the program for more than 3 days.
Okay.
Sometimes people go to the hospital or exit. We do follow up with phone calls and find out the reasons for their exit. And 6%, you could see we couldn't follow up with them, but.
Okay, nice. And then I guess my last question for you is, it looked like you have 24 clients that you're servicing. On the slide, that's just what I counted between the two of them. How many spaces do we have, and what's our occupancy rate right now?
So we have space for 25 vehicles or 25 households.
Okay.
And we have seen, a continual enrollment and people leaving the program. So we hope to keep it full.
And we've been holding pretty steady, pretty full. Do you have a waiting list right now for the program, or is it pretty much balanced?
We are always accepting calls, so we always have an interest list, and we're always enrolling as we have spots available.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. That was fantastic. And then the last question that I had to do with reasons for denial of shelter beds. And something that kind of stood out to me was separation from pets. And I know that as a council, we've toured these facilities before. We've spoken with the intake departments. We've talked about the triage that they do with the unsheltered residents when they arrive, and kind of going through their personal property, going through their pets and things. I had thought that there was a agreement or a way where, like, if they had a pet, that there was some type of shelter that we like worked with that would take their pet, that would allow them to stay with their pet? Because I've heard this deterrent before. A lot of people are alone on the streets with just their pet. Is there no shelter that we work with that will allow you to take your service animal with you, your actual companion? Because I mean, I wouldn't leave my spot on the side of the road with Pancake if Pancake couldn't come with me. So please respond to that.
I'm certain service animals would have to be accepted at all the shelters, but as far as just traditional pets, I know La Posada does accommodate some pets, like you mentioned. Sometimes they will be taken off-site to be cared for away from the owner, and I believe that's probably one of the deterrents that the owners might not be willing to separate with the pets, even though they'll be cared for off-site.
Okay, so I feel like this could kind of be a blind spot that none of us saw. And I would say a lot of our unsheltered residents don't know what the process is to make their pet a service animal. And I don't know how tedious the process is. I've never had to make any of my pets service animals because they've always been at my house and just fine. But I would think that maybe our social workers could possibly help with that. I mean, if there's a situation where an unsheltered resident won't leave that animal is obviously providing some type of emotional support and helping with this, psychological ability to kind of process what's going on. And a lot of times, like you say, you need to be loved. That's where a lot of these people are getting their love from. So I don't know that we're having tons of people deny shelter for that reason, but even just having, one person who would really accept the help and get to go on the path that John got to go on, with their animal, I think is something that as a city would be, beneficial to us. And maybe it would help us with higher success rates. I know when we started allowing more of their personal property to be brought, and having vans and things so that they don't have to leave all of their belongings on the side of the road, that made a difference. So the more that we can do to triage our unsheltered and their companions, whether they're best friends or girlfriends or pets, whatever it is that's filling that hole that they need from a love standpoint, I just like to make sure we can accommodate that. So if we could look into that, I think that how do we get those pets certified where a shelter has to accept them with our resident so that we can get them on the path to being sheltered and beneficial to the community again. So that was all the questions I wrote down. Really appreciate all of the data, the presentation, and all the work that the boots on the ground are doing regularly. Thank you.
I just want to point out with regard to La Posada, which is open presently to men, which are, I think, about 74% of our unsheltered population at last acquisition of statistic. You visited with La Posada with me once, and I visited before that, and I directly asked the La Posada staff, and they said that they do accommodate pets as long as the animal's behavior. Yeah, as long as the animal's behavior wasn't disruptive to the safety of other shelter occupants. I don't recall what the Haven House policy is on pets. I don't remember if they had that. Do you remember?
I'm not aware of it.
Councilmember Melendez?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councilmember Green, for your questions. Thank you, staff, for this workshop. And thank you, public, for participating. And thank you, of course, to our service providers for ensuring that we are offering the best services to folks in a really dire situation. I have a couple of questions. My first is about the housing assistance program. So I know that that is now an established part of our strategic plan to address homelessness. I'm so pleased that our council came together on that item. It assists with mortgage, it assists with rent, assists with utilities, and we will be reviewing a service provider for that. This might be a conversation for a future agenda item if we don't have the answers at this time, but I just wanted to ask the question, will housing assistance include rapid rehousing? So that would be rental assistance that is afforded to someone to move into a unit for the first time, typically something like security deposit and first and last month's rent.
The program as drafted is for housing retention, meaning it would be to retain their current housing. But we could consider that.
Okay. My concern would be the source of the funds, the grant.
Correct. Yep.
Would that allow for us to conduct rapid rehousing?
I don't believe it does, but I can do some additional research.
Okay, so we would have to have a different funding source in order to help someone move into a unit.
With rapid rehousing, yes.
Okay, so that might be a gap that we have. That's not necessarily the homelessness prevention side. I appreciate the term retention, housing retention. That's very specific. This is preventing homelessness, and rapid rehousing is more so for the resolving of someone's homelessness. Along with that, I would just want to ensure that the service provider that we choose or that we attract for this contract for housing assistance also provides income support and benefits assistance. So that would be assisting with getting any benefits that someone might be eligible for, SSDI and food stamps and so many other options. And I imagine that a service provider would have the ability to do that case management and provide those that benefit assistance. But I really would love for our council, I think we've been honing in more and more on the data. I really want to see the data of the folks that we're providing rental assistance to, the folks that we're assisting in preventing homelessness in an emergency capacity, right? A couple months rent as someone's going through a medical crisis, or a utility assistance after someone lost their job, right? I would love to have statistics and data on how those participants are faring economically. Are they poor? Are they utilizing public assistance? How many people who are receiving rental assistance are also receiving other forms of public financial assistance? So those data points, I think, are really important for the long-term goal of housing and economic stability for people who are poor, working class people who are hit hardest when it comes to housing and affordability and a lot of the triggers to homelessness that we see in our community. So that would be my something that I'm going to keep an eye on as we're reviewing this contract for a potential service provider for the rental assistance funds for the housing assistance. My thoughts on townspeople, I feel you, Councilmember Green. I don't necessarily want to be a guinea pig for a program that's brand new. I like the idea of townspeople seeming to be a little bit more of an inclusive organization. Elder Help was definitely geared more towards connecting with seniors. And townspeople sounds like it's branded to connect more with a variety of people, right, who just are looking for housing and looking for connections. But I am hesitant to put city resources to back something that we don't have any evidence of being effective. Next, I want to ask about legislative advocacy. So how do we conduct some of our legislative advocacy? You referenced some of the local California assembly bills that passed. Are we talking to our local elected officials? So for example, when, I can even reference it here. I can't find the page. I apologize. Thank you. You're pulling it up for me. Right. So we see some of these Assembly and Senate bills that I believe were really important for protecting tenants and establishing more housing resources for our community. I have personally gone to our local assembly members and our other elected officials, and I've advocated to them, and I've told them where I stand on these issues, and I've, essentially with a group of volunteers, have lobbied our higher up elected officials to ensure that at least they know where I stand and where advocates that work with me stand on these housing issues. But how does our city staff advocate? Did we write a letter in support of California Senate Bill 567?
Thank you for that question. So typically, if there is legislative bills that align with our legislative platform, we will draft a letter that's vetted through the city manager's office and then signed by our mayor, and then city council will receive a copy. On these bills, I'd have to double check. I do believe we were silent on some of these. However, we do have, and I'll double check on 567. However, we do also have relationships with the representative staff, such as our senator's office, assembly member's office. And so we do communicate with them regularly on quite a few bills, and also as part of our internal committees and task force, we may lobby them or talk to them about certain positions along with Cal Cities.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think that that's a very effective way to go about it. And thank you to our city attorney. He briefed me on some of the recent housing bills a couple of weeks ago, and that was really helpful. If my colleagues haven't gotten a chance to get briefed on those, I encourage you to. Mr. Chung was very helpful. Another aspect to legislative advocacy is also looking ahead to maybe things that could occur. I've heard some ideas of how we could fund affordable housing through cities that may not be interested in providing the zoning for housing, saying that they can't build or some other reason not provide the zoning, but would instead fund affordable housing in cities that do have the zoning or could build the housing. I think that this is an interesting legislative opportunity. I think that it is challenging for different reasons. This could be problematic because the need for housing is very great, but the need in our community is not only for housing, but also for infrastructure. So for example, if a coastal city with very low density zoning, who is meant to be compliant with California state requirements for building a certain number of housing units, does not want to build those housing units and then pays, a different city like the city of Vista for those affordable units, that may provide housing in our community, but it could have a negative outcome of putting a great amount of wear on our own infrastructure, whether that is our roads or our fire department, right? So I want to have the conversation about the need for more housing as a body that recognizes that we need really robust infrastructure in our community to accommodate everybody who lives here and make sure that we are safe and have a good emergency response. So that's something I can see moving forward, perhaps in the state of California, but I'm not exactly sure if it's something that I would support or if it's something that would be wise for our city to receive. One of the other things I wanted to talk about was outreach, and specifically outreach to parked cars. So I was in the neighborhood today and I spoke to some folks who have noticed some RVs and some other vehicles parked along a street. And I can tell you that street directly to staff. But I am concerned that maybe we might have some gaps in our outreach where we do have a safe parking program. Could we clarify, are we at capacity with our safe parking program? Nicole? Thank you.
We are not currently.
Okay.
That changes day to day. We'll schedule intakes a day or two ahead of time, so we're always trying to be at full
So
capacity.
we have a little bit of like a fluctuation right now. And so I think that this would be a great opportunity for outreach through Exodus to have a targeted effort towards getting people on that interest list. I think that that would be really important. I'm not exactly sure what outreach looks like to parked cars right now, but maybe we can do a little bit more of that to address the need in the neighborhood and just make sure people are aware. It sounds like self-referral, word of mouth was the primary reason why people ended up in the safe parking. So definitely want to make sure that there's some contact there.
And if I may, Councilmember Melendez, I just wanted to note that the code enforcement, when they're out doing their enforcement, public works route, or community improvement team, if they do see individuals and vehicles that are, looks like they're staying there, they do have a handout that they give them with different phone contacts for resources, as well as to our safe parking program.
Very good. That's good. I would like to follow up on that and see who takes those referrals, right? I really appreciate the illustration that we were able to receive, Elizabeth, from Exodus on John's story and how complicated it is to follow up with someone who is never really in the same place. So coming from a background of providing services, I completely understand that. But one of my big questions is in response to building trust, developing a positive narrative with the client, and Exodus's role in providing that case management, right? That is potentially there for the long term, right? Hours upon hours, right, build in order to provide those case management services, but it's really moments where you're building trust with someone where they're willing to accept your feedback and your approach. How do you, and you're welcome to step to the podium, Elizabeth, this question is for you with Exodus. How do you ensure the retention of case managers to fulfill each case?
I just want to make sure I understand the question. How do I?
Yes, so our Exodus team, there's a number of case managers that work through Exodus. And is there a high retention or is there a revolving retention for case managers? From what I've observed in the homeless service industry is that there can be challenges in holding on to those really wonderful case managers that do such a good job at building trust. So in your organization, what are some ways that you retain those case managers to ensure that they can fulfill that case for the client?
Well, I want to note that I've only been in this position for 6 months. And so far, and during my tenure thus far, I have retained all case managers.
That's great.
100%. And my role as director is providing support and being sort of a case manager to my case managers.
Okay, awesome. Because I do know that service providers that are providing direct services can experience a high level of burnout.
Absolutely.
So I believe that if something isn't going well or if we're having challenges, one of the first things we should look at is how much are we paying people, right? Are we able to retain them? Are we able to keep them on to do the challenging work that not everybody wants to do? So I'm always willing to have that conversation of compensation and making sure that we are being effective in our case management by really providing robust benefits to those who are doing the boots on the ground work. So thank you. I do have one more question, and that is, it sounds like there's so many barriers to housing, barriers to shelter. In your opinion, how does the lack of affordable housing impact your ability to serve the client?
It definitely impacts it greatly because we have there's nothing available. And as I mentioned in the narrative, there's all these steps that need to be taken before they can even secure housing. So it's definitely a big issue.
Right, and I really appreciated from the narrative too that it is about the community. I think what really struck me in that story is John was able to, he was eligible for housing outside of his community, but community really was motivating him to stay in Vista. And I feel that way too. I want to be here in this community, and I wouldn't expect anyone else to feel differently. So I really appreciate that. I understand that we are continuing to struggle with a lack of affordable homes for our community to live in, and I'm committed to continuing to advocate for that. So thank you, Elizabeth. I had one more question for Nicole, if I could speak with you. Jonathan, I could see you reaching over to say something. Or did you have any
Yeah,
comments?
I'll just want to quickly note, we did actually have that same conversation with Exodus regarding retention, and we did increase the pay for the case managers with this current year. So that is something we did consider, because you're absolutely right.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad that we have that update. That's great. Thank you, Nicole. I want to know a little bit more about the negative exits. I think it was just a little bit confusing to me. I know Councilmember Green asked about it. This negative exit number seems to be a little bit higher than what we had kind of reviewed when we were anticipating to bring on this type of program. And it didn't seem clear to me exactly how many positive or negative exits there were. So we're not quite currently at 25 spots, but that's because some people have left for good reasons and bad, and then we'll get new people coming in, and then some of them might leave. So how many negative exits have we had?
Do you want the total number?
The number, yeah.
So I have this data until October 31st. So from August 18th to October 31st, we had three negative exits, 4 for the total. So 4 negative exits out of the program.
Okay, and I mean, we're still early in our program. Is that a larger volume of negative exits than your other sites?
No, it's not. Yeah. And we are a newer program. It takes time for folks to develop that rapport. We're meeting them where they're at and doing that case management. For some folks, the program wasn't a good fit, and that's, by nature, for some folks, it won't work for them, and they self-exited.
Yes, and could you help me understand the 44% number? I think you might have said 44 positive exits. Is 44%?
Yeah.
So how many total?
So we count positive exits also with family reunification, stable permanent housing, and then also shelters or short-term housing. For the positive exits, we had 3 households or 4 individuals so far.
Okay. Well, that's great to know that. I would have expected people to be staying in longer before they're exiting, and that may be the case with the people who are currently there. But I'm very pleased to know that 4 individuals were able to exit into a more positive situation, and the Safe Parking Program did what it was meant to do, which is provide that emergency intervention for someone in that situation. So thank you so much for answering my questions. I really appreciate it.
Deputy Mayor Contreras.
So I want to thank staff and our service providers, Jewish Family Service and Exodus. This is something that really takes our community working together. So I do have a few questions. I'll start with the slide that says 7 strategies. And this is a question that I've often asked. I don't know if this is a strategy that's missing or perhaps a component of the prevent and reduce homelessness. However, I don't really see us addressing youth homelessness and housing insecurity. Does Vista Unified School District have any strategies to reduce youth homelessness and housing insecurity?
I'm not sure, but they have been involved with the new service provider meeting, so we can certainly follow up with them, see what programs they have in place.
Okay, and is that the same thing as the internal working group?
Yes.
Okay, just because I don't believe I saw them listed on there, so maybe I just missed it. Oh, there we go, service provider group. Okay, perfect. And so that just started?
Yes, we've had 1 meeting so far with the service provider group.
Where they were present?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, because I've been asking for this for a long time, and the school district has different ways of knowing who is at risk, so I want to ensure that when we're looking to prevent homelessness, that on the school social worker side, that's a connection that we're making. Now, I do see missing from the internal working group, North County Transit District. I know that we had a really positive resource fair with them, but are you familiar with the Transit Enforcement Security Unit?
I'm not, and I'll quickly add, I did forget to add them to the list, but they are part of the group as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize.
Okay, yeah, I just want to touch base on that because I get to be the chair of the Marketing, Service Planning, and Business Development Committee, and in that capacity, I've been pushing a lot on NCTD. We know that folks that are experiencing homelessness are using the system, the public transit system, and there's a lot of different touch points that we can have. And just to give you some information, the TESU unit has had in fiscal year 23, 75% success rate of folks that they've contacted taking some kind of assistance. So I really do want to ensure, and I'm pushing on this on the North County Transit District side as much as I can. And I'm like, you guys have to talk to the different jurisdictions, that especially, looking at Vista, how we have the strategic plan to address homelessness. That's critical. And just to give you some background, the TESU unit, they go out 1 to 2 times per week. They just added a social worker mid-2023. And it's been very, very positive. It's a MOU that North County Transit District has with them. They have 1 full-time sergeant and 10 full-time deputies, and that's an increase of 2 deputies to help with that. So we have the Vista Transit Center, we have Civic Center, Sprinter Station, right? So I just want to ensure that just because there's one jurisdiction here in an arbitrary line, right, and then this is us, City of Vista, we need to make sure that we're connecting those dots and facilitating a strategy to improve any gaps in communication. As far as the safe parking, I think this has just been phenomenal for the community in so many different ways. And, one of them, I know that public safety is of critical importance to this council. The fact that we have a reduction in calls for service and crime, I think is very, very important. I just want to ensure that I highlight that. That's huge. With that, I think it could be helpful because there is a list in the agenda report of code enforcement homeless cases. If in any way this list could, in the future, also be represented in a map that has, a dot with a number per location, something like that, because this is what our community is seeing. So this is where they're spotting a lot of activity. So just to highlight some of the areas in my district where I see the need for connection to folks that are experiencing homelessness. A huge one, and this is something that needs to be addressed with urgency, is at Stater Brothers. There is an individual who seems to have some kind of potentially a disability. He's older and he's not doing too well. So I don't know how many times we have interfaced with him, but I really want to see us reaching out. And that kind of begs the question as to, when we see in the community different areas that potentially this individual I've seen, later at night, sometimes during the day, but maybe it's not during the time that we do outreach. So, what are the strategies that we're looking at to have a lot more outreach outside of traditional hours of outreach that we might, have previously had as part of our plan?
So that is a discussion we've had with Exodus in the past. We are considering different ideas, but you're absolutely right. We do have a need for outside of business hours outreach, including evenings and weekends. For the most part, when we do have that need, we'll coordinate with the COPS unit. They're able to flex their schedules, but we are considering other options. As far as the gentleman at Seder Bros, I actually think Liz can provide us with an update. We've been in pretty diligent contact with him over the past 2 weeks.
Sorry if I just have to look at the most recent update today from one of my staff members. We did encounter him last week, and we've maintained contact, I believe, probably 4 or 5 different encounters. And as of yesterday, do you mind if I just read the email?
Yeah, no, that's sure.
While she's looking that up, if I may, I just want to give credit quickly to NCTD. Again, I apologize for the oversight for not including them, but they were incredibly helpful and responsive and coordinated, particularly the Vista Village Transit Resource Fair, granted us permits to access their entire olive lot for the Resource Fair, which was incredibly successful. So they have been a huge part of the success with the service group.
Right, and we're talking about continuing that
Absolutely.
type of, it was a first time, and I think, we saw a lot of success. I was able to go tour it, and I look forward to NCTD continuing to do some out-of-the-box style resource fairs just like that.
Absolutely. And regarding the code cases, we are currently going through a GIS upgrade citywide, which is going to allow us to pin these locations on a map.
That sounds amazing,
Yes,
because I
it
have
does.
been nonstop talking to our city manager about all these different GIS maps that I want. So that will be helpful.
Yeah, and we can definitely supply that map now. There is a way to do it, but to piggyback on what Jonathan's saying, we are going through an upgrade that's going to make things much more easier and quicker to do those types of mapping.
Yeah, just because for us, it's so much information, and I have to look through the list, and I'm like, okay, that's my district. This is my district. That's not my district. So just being able to represent it, geographically on a map could be just helpful. I like this list too, and if there was a congruent map form of it, that would be great. Thanks.
Sounds good.
So one of my case managers actually emailed me an update on him as one of our success stories.
Oh, thank God.
Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay, so just like John, we're not using his real name. Bobby, a 73-year-old male, has been homeless for 30 years. Client has had severe medical conditions and has cerebral palsy. Client was initially encountered by Hot Team at a local shopping center. Bobby is a happy man and immediately shares his life motto with Hot staff. Quote, "Life is about principles, and it takes more muscles and effort to smile than it does to frown. And that's why he is always smiling." Bobby's smile and laughter are contagious, and staff enjoy interactions with him. In the initial encounter, staff attempted to gauge the client's willingness to shelter. Bobby explained to care managers that he had not been able to take a shower and was embarrassed to get in the car with care managers. The client had several reasons why he was not willing to leave with outreach workers to shower or go get medical care, and that including losing his belongings and blankets. Case manager or outreach workers and Bobby continued to meet with the client routinely to build rapport and convince him to accompany case managers. Outreach workers became worried about the client's mobility and ability to move and sustain his lifestyle, as the client mentioned that when it gets cold, it gets really hard for him to move and get up. On the morning of December 5th, when care managers were doing a routine check, the client told case managers he wanted to be taken to a shower. Case managers were not expecting the client to ask to take him to the shower location, as the client had declined before. This surprise was welcomed by outreach workers, and The team was able to assist the client in transporting him to Humanity Showers in Brother Benno's. Upon arriving at Brother Benno's, staff saw the client and case managers all came together to get new clothing and shoe items for the client. Client was receptive and cheerful, patiently waiting for a shower. The client agreed to go to VCC with outreach workers to take his TB test in preparation for shelter. TB test was successful, and the client will be transported on December 8th to have his TB read.
Wow, thank you so much. And I don't know if this is confidential information, but how was this individual referred? Was it us going out and witnessing that someone was in distress? Was it, someone else that happened to do that? And thank you so much. I appreciate you reading that.
It was actually in response to an email from Councilmember Melendez.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Councilmember. So it's incredible what we've been able to do as a community, and I'm really thankful. The last thing that I wanted to point out was the motel vouchers, because it seems like we have 100% success with folks moving into permanent housing. So what is, just so that I have the number in my mind, what's the amount of funding that we have available for motel vouchers on an annual basis, or that we are, what kind of pot of money is that coming from?
So currently, the motel vouchers are only available through the Encampment Resolution Fund, which only serves the Hacienda BPO, so it's a little narrow in its application. But the Housing Programs Manager has identified $40,000 in CDBG-CV money that's immediately available to reallocate towards a citywide program.
Do we have to put a program in place, or?
It would just be a matter of creating the activity under the CDBG-CV online portal and then contracting that with the service provider to provide them.
Okay, what's the time frame for that?
I think we can probably get something operational in 2 to 3 months.
Okay, that sounds good. And that would be to service the entire city of Vista?
Correct.
Okay, because anything that has 100% success rate, we got to be doing more of. So, and does that mean that in conjunction with looking at a service provider, that we have had ongoing discussions with property owners that have motel, hotel capacity here in Vista?
Yeah, so Exodus has been coordinating the motel vouchers. I can say, actually, pretty funny timing. I was just contacted today, about an hour before the meeting started, by a local motel who was soliciting us to utilize their motel with motel vouchers and providing us a little bit of a deal.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important for us to have communications to the community about our successes and what we're doing as a city, because the more people know, the more we might find opportunities where folks are coming to us. So that concludes my questions, and I just look forward to seeing continued success and hopefully being able to participate in the point in time count this upcoming year. Thank you all so much.
Councilmember Melendez.
Thank you. Thank you for that update on that client. I had reached out to our city manager and asked about the status of this individual. And I really appreciate also the education from Exodus about the difference between a contact and an enrollment, because when we think of outreach, we might think of, many different activities, but ultimately we want to get someone through the process and through the program as much as they're willing to engage. And would you be able to confirm if this person if that activity was considered a contact, or are they now enrolled in our services?
He is now enrolled in services.
Wonderful. That is so good to hear. And I also want to acknowledge that the reason why I reached out to the city manager, and then the city manager then connected with our staff and with Exodus about this particular individual, who is now enrolled, who will be getting his tuberculosis testing done tomorrow, that hopefully will be clear so that he can be placed in a shelter. The reason why I reached out was because a Vista resident messaged me on social media, and they asked me, hey, I went over and I talked to this guy. He's super nice. I really want to make sure he gets services. Can you help him? You work with the city. And so I want to encourage our residents, who are also reaching out. I grew up in Vista, and I would see how my mom would interact with people who are on the street, and she would stop and she'd buy them a cup of coffee and she'd pray with them. She'd buy them a blanket or a sleeping bag. And I absolutely believe that there are neighbors in our community that have that type of heart to reach out and check in with folks on the street in a way that, our outreach workers might not be able to get to everyone. But if you see someone struggling and you think that the city might be able to offer them resources, do not hesitate to reach out. We can see if they're part of our program. We can make sure that they have a contact, and we can hopefully get them enrolled so that they can ultimately have shelter. So I just want to say thank you to that resident who really was the one to do the work of connecting with their neighbor on the street. And thank you for that very positive result, the very quick work that you did to ensure that this person can get enrolled and on the path to shelter.
Thank you.
Just note that Councilmember Green had to be excused for the remainder of the meeting. Okay, I have a number of data questions. I want to begin with, we used the term 12 months ago to describe Exodus's work. Actually, it was in Exodus's report. You used the term unduplicated individuals, and last year's report, which I'm looking at right now, there was reported that there were 358 unduplicated individuals that you had outreach to in 2022. And I'm trying to compare apples to apples numbers. Did we receive that same number in this report? I have several numbers that might be the same number, but I want to make sure they're not under a new label. So I want to see if the same methodology was used to create a comparative number.
I'll make a quick comment. I don't have the report you're referring to in front of me now, but the reason why we didn't use unduplicated this time was because of the confusion before. So we decided just to use more layman terms like new individual.
I like the
for
new
first time.
terms. I just want to make sure that the data, are apples to apples, the same methodology used to achieve a number year over year. That way we can actually understand, and the public can understand the difference in outcomes from year to year. I do, and I have been a vocal advocate, as you know, for the city to publish a glossary or to find one and adopt one. We still haven't done that yet, and I would very much like to see a glossary developed that all of our service provider partners sign off on, where we all agree in Vista, and frankly, I'd love to see it countywide, that we all agree to use the same words to describe the same concepts. Because it's very difficult when we're reporting and discussing these things if one group is using one descriptor and another group is using a different descriptor. I don't have a page number here, but a chart, maybe it's within 2 or 3 of this one that you're showing, says there were 179 offers for 104 individuals. Now, those are offers for emergency shelter?
Correct.
Okay. So there were 179 offers to 104 individuals. So how does that 104 individuals number compare to unduplicated individuals? And we have about 3 or 4 slides before it. We have, for program year 3, we had 289. We called it new individuals served. So was that 358 unduplicated individuals in last year's report? was that number a cumulative number of program years 1 and 2?
I'd have to go back and take a look, but it looks about equivalent to that, just based on my first look of these numbers.
Yeah. I can't add any of those numbers up to make that number. But I want to understand that essentially, and if I could have somebody from Exodus field this question, I want to understand that essentially in this program year number 3, that we had contact with 289 unique individuals, and it looks like those are the individuals that we serve for the first time, because we call them new individuals.
Yes. Good evening. So we recognized in the last session the confusion with unique and unduplicated and all that, and I do agree with you. It would be great if we had a glossary, and we've been working on operational definitions for that reason.
Good.
Interesting that you bring this up in this session, because we've been working with Jonathan quite a bit on coming up with a data plan so that we can be more consistent with this and have a clear understanding of the data points. And I believe that it's also going to be one of the goals with the service providers meeting, where we're working with the other service providers so that we can have a more consistent messaging. As far as comparing numbers previously from the biannual to this one, if you'd like me to go through and compare the numbers and get you some sort of, explanation for that, I can definitely do that. I don't have that with me today. As far as what this is concerned, this graph right here, 289 has to do with new individuals who've been referred to our services. So it is not all the clients who we've provided services to for this year.
Okay, so these are new individuals referred.
Yes.
Okay. Can you go to the screen that shows the number of individuals that we outreach to in the encampments in Vista? Unsheltered individuals that we outreach to in this program year?
Are you referring to the Hacienda BPO area?
So we have our Exodus team of 9 people. 4 of them are outreach workers. Is that right?
Yes.
Isn't that right? Yeah.
Sorry. I have to count.
And so from time to time, they go into the encampments all over the city. Is that right?
Yes.
Without limitation to the BPO.
Correct.
So wherever in the city that we believe that there are people who are unsheltered, those 4 individuals, I would say their primary function is to go out and to seek out those individuals, to locate them, to contact them, and then obviously to follow up with them and build rapport. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay. So in this 12-month period, how many individuals in total that are unique persons, did we have a conversation with or approach or have a contact with in the encampments?
In the encampments. I don't know if we have the in the encampments piece, because as you saw in that graph where it was the one with the new contacts, it also showed the referral sources. So basically, when it comes to the referral sources, perhaps this will help as well. That is, so Exodus Outreach, that is the unscheduled, I believe. Where's my list? Here we go. So the Exodus Outreach, that's the unscheduled outreach or without law enforcement. So that would include the emails that are coming to the hot email, not the referrals. So then the community improvement team posting, that would be the hot emails from the community improvement team posting notices. So when they do that, they send an email to us and we'll go and immediately do outreach.
So Exodus doesn't know the number of unique individuals that it encountered through its outreach efforts.
I'm sure we
approaching
have that
people.
number. I just don't know if I have it in the multitude of paperwork I have here. Do you have that?
May I ask, when the mayor refers to encampments, do you just mean any temporary accommodation on the street?
Let me be more specific. Any person who's unsheltered anywhere in the city who we approached who we observed unsheltered, and we approached, and when I say we, I mean Exodus and our outreach workers.
So
And the reason that that's so important is because, we have 88 people from the point in time count, which, as we all know, every one of us who have participated in it, which is a lot of us in this room, know that it's a grossly inaccurate way to count unsheltered persons. From 4 in the morning till 8 in the morning, we go out on the coldest day of the year and look for people who are living in encampments. It's almost impossible to find them. And the reality is that if we have the number of individuals that we encountered from our by name list, which would be the client list that Exodus maintains, sorted by first contact date, and we would look at people, one, who have been first contacted, unsheltered in the city of Vista by Exodus during this program year. That's the first number that I'm at. Will you make explicit notes? You take this down?
yeah, I'm ready.
And, or you can review the video, but these are the specific numbers that I'd like to have.
Please.
In addition, I'd like to know the total number of individuals that we had a last contact with in this program year through our outreach workers that were unsheltered. So those two numbers would give us the number of new people that we contacted who are unsheltered, and would give us the number of total people, the total number of unique individuals that we contacted in the encampments, unsheltered persons during this year. That would give us an idea how many new people there are, and it would allow us to compare year over year the total actual number of people in the encampments are, again, unsheltered. These people, they're living in encampments. They're either in their car or they're in encampments. And I think it would be noteworthy to break that number out as well.
Okay.
Do you think that would be valuable information?
So if I may, this number here, 299, this is the number of clients referred to Exodus for the first time, but I believe what you are looking for are total number of clients currently engaging with Exodus, including previous clients.
No. I'm not looking for the number of clients engaging, although I do want that number. The funding, a large portion of the funding for our Exodus outreach is coming through the state's Encampment Resolution Funding Grant. And it's a great concern to the residents of the city of Vista whether or not the encampments in the city, in other words, the people living unsheltered on the streets of our city, it's a great concern to know exactly how many people that is. In fact, I would say it is the singular greatest concern of this entire program. And I'm disappointed, gravely disappointed, that it's not called out in this. I will remind you that 3 years ago, Deputy Mayor Contreras and I were both in great agreement and expressed strenuously our desire for the data to be first here so that we could understand how we're spending large amounts of taxpayer money. I'm not satisfied with the data that's before us. I want you to rework this entire thing and bring it back to us. I want to know how many people are living on the streets of our city in this program year. We have, with our 9 outreach workers, we have the ability to count the number of unsheltered people on our street, which is comparatively nearly perfect compared to the point-in-time count, which is grossly inaccurate. Is that incorrect, what I'm saying? In other words, would you say that the ability for us to observe people through an entire year with a staff of 4 people all year long would you use the word vastly more accurate in terms of coming up with a number of unsheltered people in our city?
I just want to be sure I understand the mayor's request. If you want a count of all unsheltered individuals living in the city right now at the moment, The only information we could have are those that have engaged with the Exodus. Exodus will will
of course.
contact everyone they
Yeah,
encounter.
yeah, of course.
Okay, so that it is.
But
all the clients-
Exodus's mandate from the city council is to contact every person.
Correct.
And I'm well aware that they obviously could not contact every person because you can't necessarily find every person. You know, you can't search the entire city at once, all at one time. Am I making some sense here? Or am I really confusing?
What you're looking for,
I want to know how many people are living on the streets of Vista in this last year.
so you want where they are, if they're in an encampment, if they're in a vehicle, if they're in the street, if they're couch surfing, or if they're temporarily in a shelter?
Well, yeah, I think all those numbers would be highly important.
Okay, and do you want that for the first time we contacted them or the last time we contacted them? Because they
Both.
do move.
Both. Because the first time contacted is an indication of this year's growth versus the last time contacted is the whole number of people, unduplicated, that were present in the last program year, which would tell us the total number of people that were here during a one-year period of time. That could include people that were observed in the previous program year. Does that make sense?
So do you want it specific to, no, actually, no, it doesn't. I'm sorry. You want it in a specific time frame, or you want a point in time number?
I want to ask our city manager if am I making sense to you? Because ultimately you're the one that has to implement this. So let me. This is very important. Understood. Okay. So we put on our boots and our coat and we go out into the city, wherever somebody might be homeless, unsheltered. I want to be specific, unsheltered. They are not underneath a shelter. People are not actually living in the street, they're living in encampments. And when I say living in the street, I'm using a euphemism because I don't see anybody actually residing upon the public right-of-way. So I wouldn't separate that necessarily from the encampments. But what I'm saying is somebody who's living in a tent, somebody who's living completely exposed, and of course I'd like to see the number of people that we know that are living in their cars in addition to that, because they're also unsheltered, but they're unsheltered in an automobile. But so the total number of people that your 4 outreach workers and anybody else working for Exodus in the field has had a conversation with, that's unique individuals for the 12-month period. Wouldn't that tend to indicate the number of people who are actually living outside in the city of Vista? Let me use the word outdoors, living outdoors. Does that definition clearly describe the concept?
Yeah, I believe I understand what you're looking for, but I would say that as we're engaging unique individuals throughout the year, their residency in Vista may change, right? So to
Yes.
Tina's point, it would require a certain point of time that you would request.
Yes, and the
stay
point in
for.
time would be the beginning of the program year to the end of the program year. Would that make sense? Mr.
Yes.
Conley, would that make sense to you?
So
I'm now confused about the confusion. Are you confused?
No, I think
Or
I
do you clearly
understand
understand what
your
it is I'm
request.
saying?
You want the numbers from the beginning and the end of the year to determine the total number throughout the year.
And it's the number of people that are unique,
Right.
no duplicates, that we found outside. They were living outside in our city. Is that painfully clear?
Mr. Lung, can you provide
So
for
you
that?
want to know how many unique clients we've encountered by
No,
Exodus?
Mr. Conley,
Yes.
is it completely clear to you the number of people that are outside? They're not underneath
I
a
understand
building
what
shelter.
you're asking, Mayor. I'm just not sure that that data is readily available because I think
Why
what
would that
Mr.
data
Lung
not
is
be
saying-
readily available?
Well, what he's saying is these folks move around, so they may not be in the city for the entire year.
No. I'm talking about from the beginning of the program year to the end of the program year. Okay, in January, I met Jonathan on the street. He's number 1. On the second day, I met Elizabeth. She's number 2. I don't care for this purpose that Jonathan has moved out on day 2. I'm not asking you to give me a point in time count. Is that clear?
So
I'm asking for the total number of people that you had an engagement with that are not duplicated, that were outdoors in the city of Vista during the 12-month time period?
So it would be at any point during the 12-month period.
They
were
were
living
observed.
on the street.
The number of unique, unduplicated individuals who were observed at any point during the 12-month period with respect to the fact that there's no duplication.
So total on a 12-month
I mean-
period, not a comparison from beginning to end, because if we do a comparison of growth or change between the beginning of the program year to the end, you would require a point-in-time count for the beginning and a point-in-time count at the end.
I'm not comparing day one to day 365.
I thought that's what you
Doesn't
had
make any
requested.
sense. I'm comparing program year 1, program year 2, and program year 3. Right?
Yeah.
You don't think it'd be relevant, the number of, like, the most relevant statistic, the singularly most relevant statistic, the number of people that you had an engagement with during the program year that were outside?
So if I may, with the last update, we presented two different metrics, unduplicated and unique, which I believe the mayor will recall. The discrepancy was that there was a confusion between what a unique client was and what an unduplicated client, which is why we didn't include those metrics today. The difference between a unique and
Do
an
you think that the people of Vista have an interest? Do you think the council has an interest in knowing how many people are residing outdoors in the city of Vista?
I think we all
You think is
do.
that a relevant question for me to ask?
No. I think it's the best question, and I agree with you. When we presented the unique versus unduplicated,
What am I doing wrong here, John?
what unique did was counted the
What am I doing
total
wrong?
clients.
You allow him to explain himself.
The unique clients counted the total clients encountered within a program year, I believe, as the mayor is referencing.
Yeah.
But the preference was for unduplicated clients at the last update. And so we discarded.
Well, of course,
the unique
unduplicated,
clients.
because I mean, if you had talked to the same guy 10 times and you told me there's 10 people that you talked to, well, obviously there's not 10 people living. So of course I want to duplicate it. I don't understand.
So the difference between a unique client and an unduplicated client comes when you compare separate years, right? So,
Right.
for example, in year one, every client is unique, every client is unduplicated.
This is why we need a glossary. But
If I may, so in year
I'm not looking to compare a point in time on one singular day. Okay?
between program years.
The number
right?
of people that you contacted for the first time
Yes.
in each program year,
Yes.
would that not be the singularly most important piece of information to reveal whether or not the unsheltered outdoor population of Vista is growing larger or growing smaller?
It is. And we do track that data. We have that
What's
data.
the number?
We don't have it here tonight because with the last update, there was a preference for unduplicated, which disregards previous clients from the prior year, which a unique client would be included with each program
Do
year.
you have any suggestions tonight about what we might call this number? Do you clearly understand the number that I want?
My understanding so far
Yeah.
is that within a 12-month period, if at any point during that 12 months,
You had a first
someone
contact.
is first contact or at any point?
I want two things. One is first contact. Second is last contact. The reason that that's important is because that last contact number would give us the total number of unduplicated people that you had contact with in the whole year. That would be the total number of people outside, right? But the number of people you had a first contact with would be the people that were new to Vista in that program year.
I think, as illustrated in the story,
Yeah.
a person's journey and their time struggling with poverty and being unsheltered or having insecure housing, it is not linear. And so a person may have multiple, statuses. They may be in an encampment, they may be in a vehicle, they may be in a shelter, and then 2 months later, they're back on the street.
Right?
And so looking at just a point in time of their first contact and a point in time of their last contact may not provide you with a clear picture as to the actual status and the number of folks who are struggling with poverty in your city.
Well, I'm not asking for the number of people that are struggling with poverty in my city, although I'm very interested to know that number as well. I want to know the number of people that are living outdoors in my city. Do you think that that's an important thing for me to have as mayor, that number?
May I ask a
Do
clarifying
you think
question? Are
that-
you looking
no,
for the
No,
number?
I'm asking, do you think that that's a relevant number for me to have access to?
I don't know that that would answer your question.
You don't know that would answer my question?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I think it would, and I would like to have that information. I don't understand the not understanding. Mr. Conley, are you understanding? Mr. Conley, is it your opinion that this information is relevant to the city council and its work?
Of course. Yeah, and I do understand what you're asking for, and we can provide the data. I think what the folks are saying is it may not provide an accurate picture of the total number of people that are living unsheltered in our city over that time frame of the 1 year.
Well,
It's very accurate. It's
I
very
disagree
available data.
with that, and you have more experience in the matter, so explain to me why. Explain to me what other metric that I would have access to that would be more accurate. Do you think the point-in-time count is a better metric to use?
I think being that it has a set method, it has a consistent approach, and a set time. It is the most consistent way to be able to get a picture. It's not going to be 100% clean picture because there are going to be people who are in another area when normally they spend their time in Vista on that particular day. But I think what we can do is we can get with Jonathan and we can go through the different types of data points, including the methods with which we get those data points and the parameters, and we can present that to yourself and City Council to determine if that is exactly what you're looking for or if that needs to be changed. I think it's great that we're having this discussion now so that we don't have as far back to go and try and recreate data or recode data from the beginning of the.
All right. So the next question that I want to ask is, how many people in this program year did we offer shelter to that were unsheltered, that were living outside or in their car?
104 individuals.
So that 105, but we just discussed this number and it was explained that this is everybody that we offer shelter to. Is that right? Like not just the unsheltered people, but this is everybody, no matter how they were referred. So if somebody was living at mom's house and didn't have their own place because they couldn't afford it and they called for housing assistance, they wouldn't be included in this 104? This 104 is exclusive to the unsheltered population? Is that right?
Anybody who is housing unstable who runs the risk of
So
losing
this
housing.
104 is not relevant to the unsheltered population?
If we did not offer the shelter and provide the shelter, they would become unsheltered.
Yeah, but this is not the number of, I'm curious to know.
This is not the number of unsheltered.
I'm curious to know how many people did we walk up to and go, would you like to leave the encampment and become sheltered today? I think that's a very relevant number. That number alone would illuminate how many people we've been able to help get out of. Look, let me explain my perspective. The people of Vista are compassionate for every person who's without a home, but they are demanding that we solve the problem for people who are living outdoors first, because these are the people who are in the greatest threat of death from being homeless. Do you think that's true? That the people that live outside are in the greatest threat of death from their homelessness amongst all people who are homeless?
If you're talking about death as a result of being exposed to the elements, then it sounds like a logical connection, but
I mean, I think so.
Folks who are at risk of homelessness and folks who are homeless commonly have complex medical conditions and issues. We've focused
Right.
with this program not on just unsheltered, literally homeless folks.
No,
but
I
we've
know
also
that
focused
we're
on
serving a
folks who are at
larger
risk of
population,
homelessness.
but would you agree that the methods and needs of those individuals who are chronically homeless, chronically unsheltered, they've been observed for 12 months, unsheltered, or they've had, 3 bouts of homelessness? We've got a standard definition for chronically unsheltered. Am I defining it correctly?
So yes, folks who are unsheltered do take priority.
Right.
As well do families.
So you just said that those people take priority.
Yeah.
So don't you think it would be important to know how many priority individuals that we have as a separate number from the number that are a lower priority? They're
We can
also
absolutely
priority, but they're
provide
lower
that.
priority.
Yeah, we can absolutely provide that.
Yeah. I think that's highly important. And I'd like to know, as you are well aware, I receive telephone calls every week, sometimes every day. And I refer people, I referred somebody today to Sergio Sauceda. I refer people every single week to our Vista Housing hotline. And I'm intimately involved in discussions with people who are homeless and seeking shelter. And so I know there are a large number of people reaching out to us by telephone, by email, through every means necessary, but that is a different point of care than the shelter outreach. Not the shelter outreach, the unsheltered outreach. And I am very interested in knowing what the numerical quantification of our unsheltered outreach is. So I would like some very specific numbers. And then we have really got to spend some time on the definition of terms. I'm very unhappy, and I'm making very clear how very unhappy I am, because I was very unhappy 12 months ago, and I was very unhappy 6 months ago. And so I'm going to have to become more and more unhappy when I'm not getting the information I want. We're spending millions of dollars of taxpayer money, and the people of Vista have a right to know how we've spent their money, who we've contacted, exactly what's happening. I should be able to understand from the information being collected and reported to the public exactly what we're doing. That is a reasonable request for the council, who is entrusted with safeguarding millions of dollars of taxpayer funds. That is a reasonable request. And we are failing to produce that level of information, and to produce it in a way where it can be compared year over year as apples to apples information with the same methodology of collection, so that we can see whether the problem is growing or declining in the city. If you have suggestions for better numbers, I'm all about it. And I would invite you to include those numbers in future reports, or suggest for them to be included in the dashboard. I would like to have extensive discussion about that. But for us as a government not to recognize that the people that we represent prioritize those individuals who are, we heard about John's encampment neighbor, his best friend in the encampment, who died. And we don't know why he died. I don't know if you know why he died. But, the sheriff's deputies send us reports all the time of people who die exposed in our streets. And I've met many of the parents that live right here in our city. These are the children of our city. And I care about people living outside. So this is very important to me, to understand the number of people living outdoors in the city, and specifically how many conversations we had with new people. And I do think it's a relevant number. I mean, if you can think right now of a number that's more relevant, but let me be more blunt and clear. When I participated in the point in time count, individuals were making people up that didn't exist. I witnessed that, okay? And we all know that that's happening, because it's very difficult from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. to locate people in is it January or February? It was January, right?
January, correct.
Yeah.
End of January.
We go out on the coldest day of the year. Who decided? I mean, how preposterously stupid is it to go try and count people at 4 a.m. on the coldest day of the year? Is that defensible in any way? It is the dumbest thing I could possibly conceive of. It is corrupt, broken, and wrong, and it should not be the methodology that we use. Where are we at with a by name list?
The by name list is something we continue to work on now. So
We've been talking about it for years now. Are we going to have one, or are we not going to have one?
we have a form of one. I believe the mayor has seen a draft of this, and you'll recognize there's the definition of O&E and enrollment. So Exodus will provide services to clients who have not yet enrolled, including clients who don't have ties to Vista. So it's important for us to filter out that data and ensure that we're providing the same information.
So we have a by name list of people who are enrolled.
Yes,
Do
exactly
we
right.
have a by name list of people who we've encountered? Do we ask people for their name or some kind of identifying information? I know that when we've conducted surveys for point in time count, we've asked for information that was short of being PII, but it was enough, like first name, last initial, and I think the month of of birth, or what was the specific? It was enough to deconflict and deduplicate, but not enough to uniquely personally identify the person to violate their privacy if they didn't want to be personally identified. I see a head shaking in affirmation, so you understand what I'm saying. We could be and should be, and it is my mandate to you that we are going to collect information so that we understand who the unique individuals are. 3 years ago, and I have repeatedly admonished every member of the staff involved in the homeless outreach and homeless strategic plan to go back and watch the council meeting where we created this plan and where we first authorized this money, because we were in complete agreement about this. And I asked, and the council agreed, and we asked the staff to hire a contractor, and that was Exodus, to go out, and my mandate, and this council's mandate, was that you would know every person living in homelessness in our city, beginning with those people who are living outside, who are chronically unsheltered. That is the mandate, and that is what I want to know is taking place. There should be a list of every individual, and we talked about how we lost John. We lost him geographically for a time. And so I would like to ask you at this time, what conversation have we had with Carlsbad, with Oceanside, with Escondido, to establish a shared listing of individuals such that if we had established rapport with somebody in Vista and then they had moved to Carlsbad, that we would be able to work with the law enforcement and homeless outreach in those cities to say, okay, here's John. I figured out that John has been being worked with by the HOT team in Vista, and they've lost track of him. They've been looking for him. So could you please elaborate what conversations have taken place between the city of Vista, our staff and contractors, and our fellow neighboring cities to establish a cooperation of sorts so that we can track individuals as they move in their journey to be rehoused from jurisdiction to jurisdiction?
So what you're describing is basically the function of HMIS. But again, those are only for enrolled clients. So Exodus clients that are enrolled meet the same criteria of consenting to receiving services, which is the same point they're entered into HMIS. So to the mayor's point of a by name list, with every single client that we encounter, they don't all give consent to give us that personalized information, so they wouldn't be included on a by name list, which I believe falls short of what the
Do we
mayor's
solicit
requesting.
information similar to the information solicited in the point in time count, which is first name, last initial, and the...
We do not track
Why
personalized
do we
information
not
at point in
solicit?
time count. It's simply the
I
count.
would ask that we solicit that information so that we can build a list of individuals that we've contacted.
We do, and when
attempt
they agree to,
duplicate
that's
it.
the enrollment. But if they don't,
To be more specific, those individuals who choose not to enroll, if they are willing to voluntarily provide, is my request that the outreach workers would say, okay, I understand that you don't want to enroll. Would you be willing to share your first name and last initial and the month of your birth, whatever the...
So when we do outreach and when we enroll folks, we do collect information. If we're doing outreach and someone's not willing to engage with us, but they provide us with some level of information, then we would log that information. And as we get to know that person, we can fill in the blanks.
Now,
So we know our folks.
Do you solicit information from individuals who don't want to give you a full set of personally identifying information?
Right.
Do you solicit that not fully identifiable information that would tend to help us identify that person in the future that we had a conversation with before? Because you're not going to have, I'm John F. and was born in the month of May, so I'm like John F. 05. So how many John F. 05s would there be, for instance? And that's not, there's another piece of information, and you build sort of a number of letters and numbers, and it helps you to uniquely identify that person without actually knowing what their personal identity is, right? So my question is, are you willing to solicit that information? I mean, I'm asking for it because I would like that when we come in contact with that person later, that we would know that we've had 5 conversations with this individual and that it was the 6th conversation that they accepted the help. I think that would be really relevant. I mean,
Yeah, we can
if
absolutely
if
do
we're
that.
not going to,
Can I clarify
Yes,
one
please.
thing, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Are you asking for us to give you the client's actual names and information, their
Is that
personal
what I asked for?
identifiable information? Are you
that
wanting
what I
that
said?
specifically? I'm trying
No.
to clarify, because you're saying "we," and I want to make sure if you're talking about we as
So-
in homeless services.
So to repeat myself, I said when somebody that we approach who's not yet a client, when they do not want to give us their personally identifying unique name, they don't want to give us their name. They don't want to be identified to us because they don't want to enroll.
Right.
I would like you to obtain the same information that's asked for in the point in time count, which I can see you've nodded in the affirmative several times, so I think you know the information I'm talking about. It's the first name, the last initial, and I don't know if it was the month and day of the birth without the year, or maybe it was the month and the year. And so, like, again, for me, it would be like John F. 0579. So you come up with a number that it could be duplicate. I mean, there might be 10 other people, but probably in the encampments of Vista and Oceanside and Carlsbad altogether, I'm probably the only John F. 0579. But that information by itself, the deputies couldn't use to obtain my actual name, social security, date of birth, address. They couldn't actually identify me with that information. But you in the future would be able to know that you had talked to that person. And you'd be able to use that information to deduplicate the individual.
Yes, we do that.
You do that.
Yes.
Oh, so you do solicit that information from those individuals who don't want to give you their full personally identifiable information.
Yeah, so when we do
That's good.
outreach, we try and get as much information as we can. If they're unwilling to provide it to us, any level of it, then we will, as we get to know the person, we'll collect additional information and fill in the blanks.
And is that how you deduplicate the list?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good. That's what I wanted to know. Yeah, there's a lot more data here that we need to pull apart. Appreciate the question from the community about the 96% decline rate. That number was not pulled out of this year's report because it was given last year, about 11 months ago, following last year's report. It was pulled out of last year's report. And I just pulled those numbers up again from last year's report on my tablet here just to make sure I was right. And I've recalculated the numbers, and I'm within about 2%. Actually, it looked, now that I've calculated it, looked like it went down, depending upon how you calculate, whether you use 49 individuals that accepted our emergency shelter number or 53. But the reality is, it looks like, based on every number that I've been able to get access from our outreach workers, that it is approximately 5% ultimately that are accepting to go into the emergency shelter. So it's a very low acceptance rate. If you look at the total number of contacts that we've made, where presumably in every conversation, we're asking somebody to accept shelter. But we had the 358 unduplicated individuals, 2,229 contacts, and there's two different numbers, different methodology of counting, but 49 or 53 unique individuals that accepted emergency shelter. So depending upon how you calculate that number, you could come up with, anywhere from 2% to 14%. But the reality is a very low number of individuals are accepting the help. And please, you had your opportunity to speak and be heard. I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking to the community. Listen, could you please suspend, because you've had your opportunity to be heard before the council. Could you please observe the ordinances of decorum that are requested by the council? You know what? You can pull another community comment card, and you can pull a comment card. You have 3 minutes. There is a process for you to be heard before this council without interrupting the members of the council. The members of the council were elected. I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking to the community. You have the opportunity to come and pull a comment card and make oral communications. You've already given 3 minutes. You have the right to make another 3 minutes.
I'm sorry,
I would
Mr.
encourage you
Mayor,
to do
I'd
that.
like to call for a point of information. Do you accept?
What's your request?
My request is, if we're going to continue questioning the 96%, it was my understanding that what the commenter said was that the 96% decline rate was mostly due to substance use.
Had I not been interrupted, I was going to be delighted to address that concern. But
Okay.
I was interrupted in violation of our ordinance of decorum here in the chamber by the individual who has every right to come and speak and be heard for 3 minutes without interrupting the proceedings.
I respect
but-
you
but I
taking
am-
the point of information. Thank you.
I am delighted and was making my way expeditiously to answer that question. Those individuals who advance the idea that mental illness and addiction are not the primary drivers of homelessness are the individuals making it most difficult for us to solve this problem. Homelessness is primarily driven, the unsheltered homelessness, the people who are living outside, 95% of them are addicted to substance, and a very large percentage of them have severe mental illness, and many of them are suffering from both. And the American Psychiatric Association defines narcotic drug addiction as a mental disorder. So rightfully understood, nearly the entire population of people that are living in encampments or unsheltered are suffering from severe mental disorders. Now, I'm sorry if some people don't agree with that, but I've spent enough time personally in the encampments with people who are living unsheltered to know that those people who are choosing to live outside are not really making a choice to live outside. They're being ruled by a mental disorder, and it is a tragedy. And I appreciate that the state legislature finally, at the urging of this council, finally took action at the urging of Governor Gavin Newsom and many Democratic leaders to adopt SB 43 to promote conservatorship for those individuals who are now defined as gravely ill because of their narcotic drug addiction. The legislature of the state and the governor finally acknowledge formally through their words and deeds that narcotic drug addiction is a major driver of homelessness. So for those individuals who don't agree with the governor and the Democratic legislature, the state of California and the mayor of Vista, they're entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. It is the major driver. Addiction to methamphetamine, heroin, and fentanyl are the major drivers of unsheltered homelessness in our community. Anybody who would say differently is callous and uncaring and would stand as a barrier to solving unsheltered homelessness and would find me to be their opponent in every regard. Because it's true, and everyone knows it, who's spent any time outreaching to those who are living unsheltered. So I'm more than happy to address it, and anybody who questions the reality of that information could go speak to individuals who have actually worked directly with people living on our streets. I see heads nodding, thank you, in affirmation, because it's true. And it's sad that we would have a debate where we would hold the ability to solve for our neighbors' children their potential death on our streets and the ability to get them into a warm, safe environment to treat their addiction disorder, their mental health, their physical needs, to provide them the nutrition that they need, warm clothing, a shower, and the dignity and respect of a caring environment by advancing the absurd notion that addiction disorder is not the driving force in creating unsheltered homelessness. Ask our sheriff's deputies, our deputies who do the outreach to our homeless population, our unsheltered population, are sitting here tonight. Go ask any of them, and you tell me if they disagree. And they've personally encountered hundreds of individuals. Tell me if they disagree that it's 95% are addicted to substance abuse. I'm frustrated because I am not given the information after the expenditure of millions of dollars in 3 years' time when the council laid out an explicit mandate that the data, Deputy Mayor Contreras said the data was amongst the most important part of this. She stressed that. Deputy Mayor Contreras and I don't always agree. In fact, there are many things that we disagree on. And as I have been often quoted as saying, when the deputy mayor and I are in agreement, you'd better watch out and you'd better pay attention. Because when every side of the political spectrum comes together in agreement, then you know that something is important. Okay, we find it to be important. So we need data that are logical, comparable, understandable, where the descriptions don't change every 6 months. And I'm very frustrated that the terms have changed without a publication of a glossary, which I have repeatedly called for. I fear that I'm going to have to create it myself. You know, who else can do it if the staff and our service providers won't do it for us? We need to lead the creation of common terms and common reporting methodologies so that we can compare these data. The public have a right to know, with the expenditure of millions of dollars of their hard-earned dollars, they have the right to know whether we are making an improvement or whether the problem is getting worse. And they have the right, with a better methodology when it's available, which it now is, because we're out there every single day on the street talking to people. It is a much more sure way to come up with the number of people living unsheltered in our community than the point-in-time count. So to bring back the point-in-time count, which is not the product of the city of Vista, it is not the product of our service providers, it is not the product of our contractors, and we all pretty much agree, and I'm looking at people who have been long volunteer leaders in our community in homeless, and they know the point-in-time number is a broken number. It doesn't make sense. We need a by-name list. We need to care about every homeless individual in our community one at a time, by name. And no, I'm not asking, and I've said it 10,000 times, and so I'll make you listen while I say it 10,001. I personally don't want to know the names and personally identifiable information of any individual. That is not my concern. It is deeply my concern as the mayor that you know that information as the staff and professionals. You're entrusted with that. And I need to see consistency of data reported so that I know that you're looking at that data and that the public can have confidence and I can have confidence in the data that's being reported. And I find it troubling that we're not breaking out this information. So I see Councilmember Melendez would like to speak. You're recognized.
Thank you. I completely agree that the number one priority and the greatest urgency when addressing homelessness is to intervene for those that are sleeping outside in the elements. I completely agree with that. I'm not so sure about how we collect data and the direction that you're giving to our staff, what type of policy outcomes you're hoping to accomplish. So I'll ask more about that in a second, but I originally pressed my button to speak because I wanted to talk about HMIS. And we're getting new terms to identify the activities of our contractor exodus. Specifically, I think we should focus on the difference between contact versus enrollment. Are there any other terms that I need to be aware of? Or is it clear to me and to the public that the activities that you perform are either a contact or an enrollment, which may include any number of services? Is there anything else?
I think the more important distinguishing terms would be outreach and engagement and enrollment. Contact can be involved with new clients, with enrolled clients, O&E clients, but the primary difference between an O&E and enrollment is that consent that's given for continued case management and services to be administered.
So would
after
outreach and
enrollment.
engagement be considered contact? What is contact?
So contact is just any communication efforts between staff and a client.
Okay. At what point between contact, outreach and enrollment, or outreach and engagement and enrollment is the individual entered into HMIS?
Enrollment.
Okay. What has to be accomplished in order for the person to become enrolled in the program?
Consent in writing.
In writing, right? I used to provide services, so I do understand you're getting all of your consent forms, right? And you're gathering their data into HMIS. Maybe good information to have, Mayor, and maybe this would cover a larger ground. So let's say we go into an encampment and there's 4 people there, and we have enrollment and consent from 3 individuals, but one of the individuals evades the outreach workers and they do not want to be enrolled, they do not consent to being contacted. Can we collect that data of people who we were not able to enroll?
I believe we are.
Okay. I think if that data were compiled, it would be able to create a greater picture of obviously the folks that we know are in that encampment. We have their contacts. We've enrolled them. They're in HMIS. How do we categorize them if they're not in HMIS? Where does that data live?
That is just an Exodus internal database.
Okay, I think that would be good information to have. Mayor, do you think that would be good? I feel like that would create a more thorough picture of those encounters. The other question is, I don't know if this is maybe a rule of the Regional Task Force on the Homeless, but are we able to, is there any outreach that is conducted and permitted with HMIS where you can collect someone's information without an enrollment status? I'm guessing not, because you have to, the only qualification is to get their consent and their name and their willingness to participate.
Yeah, which is something that I believe the mayor brought up previous to, is that we can solicit for this information. Whether or not they choose to give it is up to them. But I would imagine, I'll allow Access to clarify if they think differently, but for the most part, I don't think clients who do not choose to enroll would be willing to give up the information.
Sure.
But perhaps
I understand that
some
enrollment
pieces.
is the threshold for how we get the data. And I think that if the majority of the data that we receive is, 75% of the picture, and then there's a handful of individuals who we cannot enroll because they're evading our engagement, perhaps we can include that data to get a fuller picture of who is outside. Who, with our own eyes, who did we see? Maybe we can give a physical description of them, right? And perhaps those end up being not very good data points because they end up being duplicated. We might have to be honest with ourselves about that. This person in a brown jacket and blonde hair might evade us 15 times, right? But we can at least have the data to show that there were observations of people who are living outside who did not participate in an enrollment, were not entered into HMIS, right? But I do think that the presentation of the information is mostly satisfactory to me because it's illustrating what the program is doing. And this is where, Mayor, I don't know what your goal is. We're getting this data, yes, to show to the public that we're taking their concerns seriously, that homelessness is the biggest issue facing our community. And we want data to know who is impacted and who we are serving. The biggest responsibility we have here in this body on the Vista City Council is to provide a policy direction on the solutions. I'm sure we've seen the headlines of all the money the state of California has paid on homeless services that could have gone towards housing people. And I will continue to assert that even if housing isn't the cause of the homelessness for someone, that it is the solution. The common denominator for every person's homelessness is the lack of shelter. And I do believe that housing is a human right. So I do go against my Democratic colleagues at times when I do not feel like the actions are justified. And I have been in opposition to programs like conservatorships and care court when they do not adequately address the housing. Because if we are to categorize people based on mental health status, but we do not provide sufficient funds for their housing, or we do not provide sufficient infrastructure of the housing for them to live in, then we are essentially designating them into substandard forms of housing. We need to make sure we have robust funding for housing, that we're building the housing, so that folks that, yes, are on the street, they're self-medicating, they're using illicit substances. I used to work in a recovery program with people who were on heroin and meth and addicted to alcohol. And it is an epidemic and an absolute crisis. And that's why I am going to continue to support permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is over 80% successful in resolving someone's homelessness permanently. Permanent supportive housing not only offers the housing for the person, which we know is the common denominator for all people experiencing homelessness, is that they need a home, but it also provides those wraparound services so that someone is in recovery services, so that someone has access to case management. I think that our city, we can have all the data points in the world, but we need to look at the facts of what really is effective at resolving homelessness, and that is permanent supportive housing and other similar programs that meet someone in their traumatized experience and resolve homelessness permanently for them, especially those that are chronically homeless, that are going to have a very hard time rehabilitating with more mild interventions like a shelter. So I think that these data points are helpful in getting the full picture. I wish that there was a way for us to capture people's information without an enrollment, but I understand the dignity and privacy that is necessary, and I do uphold that. So going forward, Mayor, I think that this has been a very provocative conversation, and I mean that in a helpful way. I think that it has brought out a lot of concerns that we have. I would like to know from you, with this data, whether it shows we have more people on the street than we thought or less people on the street. I think as elected decision makers, we have suspicions of what direction we need to go in. And we need the confidence of the data sometimes to be able to make those decisions so that we can prove to the public we're making a decision based on fact and not just based on, irresponsibility. So I'm going to continue to advocate for permanent supportive housing and solutions that really resolve someone's homelessness, because that is the policy direction that I believe is going to be the most effective and the most humane. And yes, of course, address the substance abuse issues in our community at the same time. But I do think we need to include a little bit more data. If we have information on who is evading our outreach, we want to get that included, because maybe we need to take a different approach with those folks. And in general, more data, the better, especially for our professional staff. I don't want you to be confused. I would rather us need to ask more questions and to take a deeper dive. I think it might be helpful for even the council to delegate a subcommittee for the purpose of data collection and making sure that there is adequate preparation before these types of meetings. I don't know what the rest of my council thinks about that. We have barely a quorum right now. So Mayor, I'd love to know your thoughts on if an additional data point about those who have evaded contact helps you get more information. And what are your thoughts on the policy directions that we need to, we're doing a lot of good work, but it's not enough. The problem is still bigger than it ever was. And I believe we need more housing infrastructure. I believe we need more permanent supportive housing. I believe we need more affordable homes that are deed restricted affordable. That is my belief. We might not agree. We might find some consensus in some areas. So this meeting, I know, is in part to receive information, but I also want to be able to provide that policy direction that has allowed us to be so successful this far. So I appreciate the discussion. Let's see how we can move forward.
And I join you in the call for permanent supportive housing. I have advocated from this dais for permanent supportive housing. I voted with you to create permanent supportive housing. I have spoken to staff in the last 7 days to receive a briefing on where we're at. We issued a request for proposal for permanent supportive housing. The city council voted to make a prime piece of real estate available for permanent supportive housing. And staff, no, we didn't hear anything about that, and we probably should have. But let me update you, and then staff can correct me if my recollection is inaccurate. Staff informed me that our RFP ran afoul of the Surplus Land Act that was recently adopted a year ago, whatever, by the legislature. And staff believes that the Surplus Land Act is going to be capable of yielding the exact product that we wanted to build. And so staff doesn't think that we need to go back out with an RFP, but staff believes, and look for Mr. Conley for acknowledgement that I'm getting this just right, that we're marching down the road of procuring permanent supportive housing with the land that we're making available. We're just doing it in a slightly different way in accordance with the Surplus Land Act. Is there anything else that's important to add to that?
The only clarification I would make is that it was not staff's discretion that
State
recognized
law.
that. Yeah, exactly
So
right.
I
It
think
supersedes
our attorney
other
Walter
law.
Chung figured that out and told us what we needed to do to get right with the law, right? Good work. Okay. You asked, and I want to reiterate, we've had a discussion. We're not asking for personally identifiable information. Personally identifiable information, to get elementary with it, would be the kind of information that the deputies would ask me for, that would allow them to know my first, middle, last name, would allow them to know my date of birth, my last known address, kind of things that would allow somebody to identify me uniquely as an individual amongst all individuals. What we are asking, what this council is asking for, is to solicit, and I have seen this information solicited during the point in time count, first name, last initial, month and year, or whatever it was. They are asking for it on the point in time count, and I saw no individual who did not want to be interviewed who had any difficulty whatsoever with providing, because it wasn't enough information to personally identify the individual, but it was sufficient information to deduplicate for the count purpose. And that level of information would just allow us to sort of provide a serialized identifier for this individual, a unique piece of information, but not personally identifiable information. That's very, very important. You asked me, fair question, what kind of policy outcomes are you hoping to accomplish? I don't have any idea. I am not searching for data to support my policies. I'm searching for data to support policy creation. Without the information, we are not empowered as a council. Without information, we cannot adequately respond and create policy. And very also important, without data, we cannot hold staff and contractors accountable for the expenditure of millions of dollars of taxpayer funds. And taxpayers have a right to know in a quantifiable way what the product or result was for the expenditure of their monies. These are not our monies. We did not earn them. They belong to the public, and many people worked very hard for these dollars, and they submitted them involuntarily to the government so that we could do good things for them. They have a right to know in a quantifiable way, in a cognizable way, in a plain and simple way what we did with their money. I am committed to that amongst many things. That is a top priority for me, is transparency and accountability in government. My last thought on that is, if you cannot measure it, you cannot solve it. If you don't know what the size of the problem is that you're dealing with, how possibly can we size the resources response to it? So I think that's incredibly important. Deputy Mayor Contreras.
I'm sorry. Could you answer the question about the data points of someone who may have evaded encounter activity?
So if somebody doesn't want to provide us their first name and last initial, there's nothing we can do, right? If we ask them, hey, I understand you don't want to give us your first and last name and your date of birth, that's okay. Would you be willing to give us this lesser identifying information? If they say no to that, what else can we do? As you rightly indicated, there's nothing we can do. And we may have some people, there may be more than one KDM, that has your month and year of birth. Okay, no big deal. But we'll still largely deduplicate, right? It still makes the data way more important and valuable and more accurate. So yeah, which is why, I'm not making this up. That's how the point in time count does it.
No, and I appreciate that, and I would agree if this is what you're calling for, I would agree that more of the data that we are collecting for HMIS would be included, not just the programmatic data.
Yes, I completely agree. And that's why I think it's so important that our staff gains access to HMIS. We've been repeatedly thwarted in our efforts to obtain information by the insinuation for the 10,002nd time that we want personally identifiable information, because apparently we're all going to go on a shopping spree with the unsheltered person's social security number. I don't know what, we're not asking for it for the 10,003rd time. We don't want that information for the 10,004th time. We're not asking for it. I'm going to count that until I get to 20,000. What we do want is we want data that are relevant to make policies with. So, Deputy Mayor Contreras.
I think we've asked this before, but we haven't actually made this part of our, council strategy. And we don't have any of these at the current time, but an ad hoc committee, that's permissible by our municipal code?
Yes, but if the council wants to do it, we'll have to agendize it and bring it back on a future agenda.
I think we should agendize it for a future agenda sometime next year to discuss whether we want an ad hoc committee or not in regards to the strategic plan to address homelessness, and not to narrow the focus, because at the time of the discussion, we may want to have this ad hoc committee have certain goals beyond data. But, it is something that we've been requesting. So I do agree with you, Mayor. We've had agreement for years in that we want more data. I think what can be really confusing for the folks on the other side is that if there is professional definitions that are used, then there was a disconnect with the council being able to maybe understand those professional definitions, and there was a request to change it. And I think that perhaps was not a good request, because now we're going back to the original thing. We, with the exception of Councilmember Melendez, have not served this population before. I don't believe it's appropriate for us to demand a different definition be used. I think that we have to use what is used in this world, and then we just have to understand it better. So we may need more one-on-one coaching with Jonathan or Melda or Exodus or whatever the case might be, because and I just think the consistency is really important. So I want to go off of what you all use, and then we just have to learn that. And then, going back and standardizing all of the information to that professional definition, I think is important. And I just want to see if maybe am I understanding this correctly? On the slide that says new individuals served, the blue bars, the first referral to Exodus, is that unduplicated?
That is unduplicated, correct?
Okay, and then the first enrollment, is that duplicated?
Unduplicated.
That's unduplicated as
Correct.
well. Okay. And then on the following slide, which shows total contacts, that is 100% duplicated.
100% duplicated.
Okay. So that's where I feel like we have, and more data is always critical. I mean, we're always asking for more data. But I do believe that we have a sufficient threshold of data where the public can understand that this issue is actually getting worse. And I don't believe that in changing any of the definitions, we are going to see this problem get better. There are so many factors that are playing into the fact that folks are having a harder and harder time with their costs of living and maintaining shelter. So more data is always better, but I do just want to say that in my perspective, we have a sufficient minimum threshold of data that allows us to make policy decisions. There's no way that we're ever going to be able to get 100% data, and I think I almost feel like this is a little bit congruent to how some folks view school districts and their use of McKinney-Vento numbers to say that that's not an accurate portrayal of who is homeless. But it is a very generalized picture of what people are experiencing as far as being housing insecure. So again, the more data, the better to be able to discern, is this person chronically homeless or are they not? Is that the two basic data points that you're looking for? Someone who is chronically homeless versus someone who is not?
Yeah.
Okay. So just to clarify, because it can be a little bit difficult because we get so passionate, but it's important to be able to get to the root of what the council's asking. And I think that sometimes there's been difficulty in providing very direct focus and direction to staff and to our contractor to do this type of service. So I just want to use your all's definitions. I want them to be explained to us if we have additional questions. And I do see the importance of looking in this number of 289 in year 3 that are unduplicated, new individuals served, how many of the 289 were experiencing chronic homelessness versus, a different situation. And in this case, I would also assume that someone who has a vehicle would not be part of the count of who is chronically homeless because they have, I'm going by what you kind of outlined as a definition for this, because they have this last bastion of shelter. So I'm not saying that I agree with that definition or not, but I'm trying to clarify kind of what went on here for about 30 minutes plus, because I just don't want this to continue to happen. So I want to ensure that we are giving very clear direction, because I know it can be confusing when you have 5 people, even just 3 people, trying to figure out how we're going to move forward, and then you get all this different direction. But it seems like we might be in consensus, with the exception of Councilmember Melendez and the definition of chronically homeless versus, someone being without shelter. And I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out what your definition is. So I don't have more thoughts beyond that. I think it's kind of open to interpretation, but then we could also have a secondary, if we wanted to look at chronically homeless outside and chronically homeless in a vehicle, then that could also maybe work as a consensus of the council's overall data points that we want to see in addition to what has been provided. And then just to get clarification as well, Mayor, your citation of 96%, was that a refusal rate of 96%?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk through how I came up with the number.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing is it seems like you are aggregating folks that have mental and behavioral issues with folks that have substance abuse disorder, because you're seeing that the substance abuse disorder is a subset of mental and behavioral health.
According to the American Psychiatric Association, it is.
Okay. I don't know if it's 96% of folks that are refusing any services because of substance abuse disorder or behavioral and mental health issues. I think I would say that number is a little too high because specifically in the state of California, the cost of living is really, really difficult. And so if that number were less than 90%, I would say that maybe that's within the ballpark if you're aggregating those two. But again, I'm not sure. I looked at some different data points and I saw how maybe you came up with that. But I think nevertheless, if we really want to address folks that have substance abuse disorder, then we need to be putting in our strategic plan to address homelessness the ability to have more treatment facilities. That is a strategy that potentially, should have always been part of this. And I don't think any other council member has ever requested that. But that's potentially something that we can look at, understanding that is extremely expensive and very difficult to connect to those services for a myriad of reasons. But I think it's important enough that we should be looking at treatment for folks that have substance abuse disorder in our strategic plan to address homelessness. Let me see if there's anything else. The permanent supportive housing, I just want to make a correction, and I'm not sure if this is what you said, Councilmember Melendez, but I thought I heard 8% success rate. 80? Okay, I thought I heard 8. So just as clarification, because if it was only 8% successful, we probably wouldn't be doing it. So I was like, and the figure that I've seen that I'm recalling is 86% effective. Yeah, I think those are all my clarifications and things that I would like to see. And I'm excited for the council to have a discussion on whether we want to have an ad hoc committee or not. City Attorney, ad hoc committees, because I in the time that I've been seeing this council, which was since maybe around 2017 beginning, I've never seen an ad hoc committee. Do we have rules governing how many council members? Is that just comprised of council members? Is it part of the community? Is it a mixture of the two? Obviously, we can't have Brown Act violations, so there would be a limited amount of council members that could be part of that. Can you, if you have information as to how that is governed, I would like to know.
In general, there's several types of ad hoc committees. There's temporary, there are standing ad hoc committees. And then the composition will determine whether they need to be Brown Act compliant. So if it's only two council members or one with, so an ad hoc committee could be 2 council members at least or more. And if it's 2, then there's no Brown Act doesn't apply. You could have citizens on ad hoc committees. So, it could be any combination. So I'll bring that forward to you when that item comes back to give you all the variables.
Okay, that sounds good, because, and I just want to throw this out there, I mean, it would make sense if there are members of the council, and especially if one of the goals of this ad hoc committee ends up being the standardization of data collection and reporting to the council, that our service providers be part of that ad hoc committee as well. And sometimes it's really good to be able to have that different type of communication and interface with our service providers, so we can come to an understanding. And then I'm assuming that this ad hoc committee would then present some kind of a summary to the council body as a whole.
Correct.
Okay, awesome. And I do appreciate the update on the permanent supportive housing. There are 2 lots that we were looking to build not too far from here. And with that, I think that's all I have to say. Yeah, thank you.
I would support the committee to discuss data that the council would like, so long as it's Brown Act agendized and every member of the council has a privilege to participate. That way we don't have to exclude anybody that would like to participate. But we could name members of the committee. This way, say a certain council member doesn't want to participate, they wouldn't be impugned for not attending that meeting because they may not be a member of that committee, but they would be welcome to attend and have input and speak in that committee discussion. I agree with you. I'm not really interested in changing the names of data. If there are industry standardized names for certain methodologies of producing data, tell us what they are. And we're relatively smart people up here. If you give us the glossary I'm asking for, I can't look up unduplicated individuals in Merriam-Webster's. I haven't tried yet, but I'm relatively certain it doesn't exist in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. I own a few dictionaries, and that's not any of mine. And I don't think you can even search the internet for it necessarily. But if you create a document where you define these terms clear enough that reasonable people can understand what they mean, and then you stick to them, I think with regard to our potential disagreement about the importance of this particular number that I wanted to say that I think all statistics are imperfect. What is important is that you are able to have a linear comparison of the same methodology for determining a particular statistic year over year. That is what is missing here. Let me be clear. That is what I'm looking for, is the ability to compare results year over year so that we can see the movement. I have actually studied at the collegiate level survey research and statistics, and I'm actually quite versed in the subject. And I can tell you that we never, in survey research, ever consider the number itself to be accurate. We are always looking for the movement in the number over multiple surveys. And as data scientists understand that it is the movement of numbers over time that is relevant to understanding and to formation of decision-making and policy. It is not so much the number itself, but the movement of that number, so long as the methodology to obtain the number is consistent over time. Okay, so that's what we're looking for, is the linear progression. I didn't really understand the difference of opinion that seemed to be had over whether or not they were in their cars or not. I think it's important to know how many people are in their cars, as we have authorized $1 million, a program for people who are living in their cars, and we have a specific program for that. I think it matters to know how many people are in their car, but I didn't want to deny those people any service that we would provide or any consideration that we would provide the other. So I didn't really understand it, but I didn't think I had any material difference of opinion there. I wanted to say, for everybody's benefit, I'm not an opponent of housing. I'm not an opponent of affordable housing. I voted to create multiple affordable housing projects that are directly subsidized. I am an open and a vocal enemy of inclusionary housing. I believe it makes housing more expensive for everyone. I'm not going to get into that again here tonight. I've spent a lot of time on this dais explaining why I oppose that. I think it actually is a lottery system, looks like we're giving things to people, and in reality, very few people qualify for it, and it actually makes everybody else's housing more expensive. Let us not debate that tonight, because we spent a whole lot of time debating that already. But I have supported certain specific types of affordable housing. And I am keenly aware, and if there is a way, I would like to be informed of it. You cannot put somebody in the conservatorship if you do not have an appropriate and acceptable place for them to stay. I could not be responsible for the custody and care of another person if I don't have a suitable environment for them to live in. How possibly could I? How possibly could we expect the courts to impose conservatorship on somebody who suffers methamphetamine-induced drug psychosis or has severe schizophrenic or severe bipolar disease if there is not an appropriate medical facility to treat their needs? So clearly there is a chicken and egg problem. And clearly, I agree with you, the facilities, the housing, the permanent supportive housing, the psychiatric facilities, and I want you to know, and I apologize for being a poor correspondent and not having told you before this, but I have spent extensive time with our hospital leaders, with our county board of supervisors, with our sheriff, with Luke Bergman, our chief mental health officer for the county. I am engaged in extensive discussions with our countywide leaders on this because I am firmly committed that we need more mental health residential resources. We need, I spoke recently, the SB 43 has been on major review this week. On Tuesday, 2 days ago, the Board of Supervisors voted to delay implementation of SB 43 because hospitals lobbied and said, we don't have a place to keep people. I spoke to leaders at Palomar Hospital. I spoke to leaders at Tri-City Hospital. I spoke to leaders at Scripps Hospital. And what I learned from the people at Scripps Hospital is they don't have a psychiatric facility. The only thing that they can do for somebody who's in a state of psychosis is strap them to a bed, and then they have to take a medical personnel has to be in the room by state law with them 24/7 while they're strapped down. And clearly that's not a humane way to restrain somebody who's in a state of psychosis. So we're building 16 beds right now at Tri-City. It's under construction. I don't know when I was at the groundbreaking. I don't know when it's going to be open, but it should be soon. Palomar Hospital has a proposal to build 82 new psychiatric beds, and those beds would be important for people who have a severe narcotic addiction and who are suffering from drug-induced psychosis, for them to detox and be treated. And those beds are hugely important. I've had conversations with, we had the meeting of the 18 mayors in San Diego County, and we discussed specifically that there are presently only about 82, according to Mayor Todd Gloria's numbers, detox beds available countywide. We need more detox beds. Dr. Bergman, our chief mental health officer, has asked us to consider in Vista not building what's called permanent supportive housing, but instead to build a product called board and care, which is a slightly lesser intense, but it would serve a greater number, potentially larger population. I immediately came back and had a conversation with Jonathan Lung and our city manager, John Conley, and said we should consider building this product instead because our county's chief mental health officer has said we could serve more people with it. I have shown at every turn a willingness to build the kind of products that would help people who are suffering from drug addiction and mental illness. Clearly, if there is not a place for the individual to live in a safe, humane, clean environment, the kind of one that I would put my family into, then clearly we cannot treat somebody who is in need of involuntary treatment. But let me be quite clear that the state legislature, the governor of this state, and most leaders are beginning to wake up. I've been talking about this for 5 years, and there are people in the audience tonight that know I'm telling the truth. Actually, it's been 6 years now that I have been a warrior advancing the concept of involuntary treatment because we have individuals on the street who are too sick to know that they are sick. They suffer from mental disorder that is narcotic drug addiction, as so defined by the American Psychiatric Association. I don't think it's important, really, to call out that it's necessarily narcotic addiction or it's severe bipolar or schizophrenia. Mental disorder is mental disorder. The effort to pin it exclusively on drugs is to stigmatize the mental disorder. I'm not trying to stigmatize the mental disorder of narcotic addiction. I just want to help those people to get free from the addiction that is literally depriving them the ability to live indoors in a humane environment. It's shortening their lifespan on the street to an average of 4 years, and our sheriff's department is sending me a press release every month telling me that somebody has died in these encampments because of their addiction and their exposure. And that works on me. And I have met the parents. I have been with mothers who are crying. I have filmed for nonprofits in our community the stories of mothers who are, their kids are dying on our streets and have died on our streets. Okay? I have talked to fathers whose daughters are dying in our encampments. This is personal. So for anybody that wants to make politics out of trying to help people, bring it on. I'm not going to put up with it anymore. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. We're going to solve the problem. We're going to do it humanely. We're going to protect people's constitutional liberties, their civil liberties. We're going to get people the housing they need. We're going to get people the psychiatric care that they need. And I want to work with you to do it. And I appreciate your willingness to work with me on that. I don't think, honestly, the differences of opinion and direction here are so great that there are many things that we vehemently disagree on. But I don't think a lot of these issues are amongst them. I think we all want to help these people, and we can all acknowledge the fact that our neighbors are seeing people. There was a man on the day of the Christmas parade. I walked back, I parked halfway along the parade route, and I had to walk back halfway down the parade route. And there was a man who was, very clearly soiled and was screaming out loud, and just screaming into the air right in front of the Artist Lofts project. And it's just, it's an everyday occurrence in the city of Vista and in the county of San Diego that we are watching people scream wildly into the air at nothing. And I'm sorry if I want to help those people get out of that predicament. And anybody that wants to accuse me of being cold-hearted for doing it, I'm ready to have a debate with. And I'm ready to question their moral fiber. I think that's all I have to say tonight, but maybe we'll find some more things. Councilmember Melendez.
I welcome more things. My reason why I pressed my button here was to explain my disagreement about chronic homelessness. My understanding is that chronic homelessness is if you have been homeless for 1 year. There's some nuances there, but I do agree that maybe parsing out the data to identify folks that are sleeping in their cars versus those that are sleeping outside in the elements. That is exactly why I called for enhancements to our outreach to people who are sleeping in their cars. I see it too. I walk the neighborhoods and I go to our local parks and I see people who are visibly sleeping in their vehicles.
Sure.
So I definitely want to make that distinction that, there are folks that have been sleeping in their cars for over a year. We now have a safe parking program that they can become enrolled in. So they might need a slightly different approach. So I understand how parsing out the data might be helpful. In terms of housing and policy direction, Mayor, I've seen quite an evolution from you since I first joined this council. I think that we have had some contentious conversations because I'm coming from just simply a different perspective. And I think that we both have similar interests in relieving suffering. But the source of that suffering, we might have different journeys in understanding how someone gets to where they are. When I was providing services, I would meet with clients who would, self-report how they ended up on meth. And a lot of times, I heard this story again and again and again for it not to be some sort of important telltale sign of what's happening broadly. But people would tell me that they would, be in a dire financial situation, maybe even in a family conflict that would result in their housing insecurity. And with the purpose of self-medicating or even having greater alertness being on the street, they would elect to use methamphetamine to stay alert, to stay sharp, to protect their things so that they could prevent being assaulted, so that they can prevent being victims of theft. And we do have to talk about substance abuse, about self-medicating, about what can devolve into a behavioral health condition that is an addiction or a substance use disorder. I will continue to call our council to look at the overall economic constraints of our community. That when people are poor, when people have to work multiple jobs to pay rent, when people have a lack of opportunity, they only need to go through one crisis to be on our streets. And that's, maybe we don't have the data for that, but I think that's a reflection and an anecdote of a reality people are seeing all the time in the neighborhoods that I represent. That people who are currently housed are afraid of what could happen to them if they lose their job, they end up on the street. They know that the path is wrought with addiction and trauma and pain and abuse and a lack of social safety nets and a revolving door of services that never seems to fix it. And because we have had potentially years of discontent when it comes to the data, I think it is imperative that we come together in some fashion. Maybe it's in a public meeting of the whole council, maybe it's in an ad hoc committee, to define what our methodologies are going to be for the sustainability of the organization. Because the homelessness crisis may not be resolved during my terms of office or any of our terms of office. But we do have a responsibility to set our community up for tackling this issue by creating some sort of consistent metric that we're just content with. And that way staff doesn't have to continue to change things. So I think that this conversation arouses a lot of challenging emotions for myself. I experienced burnout when I was providing services, and that compassion fatigue where I couldn't stand to see any more suffering. And because I felt like I couldn't really continue to help in my organization where I was serving, I looked to serving in local office because I thought our city could do more. And I continue to think that our city can do more. And so that's why I call myself a progressive. I really believe in advancing social and economic equity to make sure we have a future where these things don't happen, where there are not the same economic and social conditions for someone to end up here in the first place. And I appreciate you being a champion for residential care. I think it's important to be a leader in that. I even spoke with a constituent today who, knows that there are potentially resources that could come to Vista for those people. And I had to say, I would never turn away resources for our community. Even if it's stigmatized, I want to make sure that those who need the help, the City of Vista is going to provide those spaces and those safety nets for them. I wanted to clarify my disagreement about chronically homeless. I'm happy to collect data on people sleeping in their cars. And I'm really looking forward to us developing consistent metrics going forward, because I think it's going to help us make better policy decisions where we're not fighting each other on the data. We can just have an earnest debate about what do we believe is the best path forward based on the numbers and the change in numbers in front of us. So thank you, Mayor, for explaining your position on some of these items. And I agree. I think in the majority of cases, we would probably agree on a solution that's placed in front of us.
I appreciate your remarks, and I would just say there are two groups of people who are homeless. There are many, as we've discussed, there are many subsets, but there are individuals who are homeless or housing insecure because of the affordability crisis that we face. There is no question about that. But then there are people who are chronically homeless, and it is my considered opinion and educated opinion that what is driving chronic homelessness is severe mental illness and drug addiction. Because I know that if I was homeless, I would show up at Operation Hope, and I would bring my family, and I would beg, and I would do anything that I had to do. And I know that the people who serve are housing insecure families who've had an affordability event or a financial crisis. I know that they know that those families reach out, and they reach out to the City of Vista every single day, and they ask for some help so they can get back on their feet. And all they want is to provide for their own families, and they just need a little bit of help to do it. And I'm sure it's a great pleasure to see. I mean, I've met some of those people, but for those that work with those families, I know it must be a great pleasure to be able to help them get back onto their feet. I would love to continue our discussions about how we can really help working families, which is so important because Vista is a working community. Our average income, our AMI in Vista is 25% lower than the county. We truly represent the working community of San Diego. And the policies of densification have clearly not made New York, Boston, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, or any other big city affordable. They haven't made Los Angeles more affordable, and they will not make San Diego County more affordable. Densification does not create affordability. It has never, and it will never. If you could show me where somewhere in the world it had, I might be more inclined. And this is the big debate that we're having here, isn't it? Right? Is over densification in land use, development, and we all want to make housing more plentiful, but we're having a great debate about whether or not to build it here or elsewhere. And the reality is that it will never become more affordable here if you densify, because as the number of people living in every square mile increases, so too do prices. Also, if we truly care about those who have troubles with affording their housing and their basic needs, we will not pursue policies that make electricity and water and food unaffordable. We will not pursue the policies that crush working families in the state of California, that have made it almost impossible to live here. If we really wanted to help the American family, we wouldn't support policies that have driven massive interest rate increases, because nobody, I mean, you're a little younger than I am, and I feel horribly for everybody in your generation I don't know how you'd ever buy a house with these interests. I couldn't buy a house. And I've done pretty well. I'm proud of how well I've done. I couldn't afford to buy it. I couldn't buy the house I live in today. I could never afford it. I don't make enough money. So I don't know how anybody's going to succeed and have the kind of quality of life that I've had in Vista, where I've achieved the American dream. I don't see the way, because of the interest rate crisis, because of the affordability crisis, because of the price of housing. And if we look at policies that Sandag and the County of San Diego have implemented, like the VMT development, and we all talk a lot about the mileage tax, and that's one part of vehicle miles traveled, but I think you're aware of the VMT limitations on new developments in the unincorporated parts of San Diego County. If we're not going to allow people to build new communities to live in, then housing is never going to get cheaper. It's going to get more expensive, because it did in New York, Washington, D.C., Boston, Los Angeles, and every other place where population density per square mile went up, so did housing prices. And all of the rent subsidy programs, all of the affordable programs, all of the rent control, and all those policies have not made it affordable for working people to live in New York City. And they haven't made it affordable for San Francisco. They haven't made it affordable for any of those cities. None of those policies have achieved affordability for working people in any of those cities. And it isn't because we just haven't done it enough or tried hard enough yet. They just don't work, because the first three rules of real estate, if our realtor was here, he'd tell you, are location, location, location. Location of real estate drives real estate prices. It's an immutable economic fact that some people want to bury like an ostrich with its head in the sand and ignore the fact that that is the driver of housing cost predominantly. The other thing that's predominantly driving right now is the fact that we're sitting with $14 million of ARPA money in our stormwater account. And we're one of, tens of thousands of agencies all over the country that are holding money from the ARPA plan that we haven't even spent yet. We don't even have the staff available to plan and spend all this money. And so for years to come, massive waves of additional consumption will continue to drive spending that will cause inflation to continue to outstrip historical norms and will make housing unaffordable for your generation, for your children, for your siblings. And it's not fair and it's not right. So if you want to know why I believe what I believe, why I fight for what I fight for, I'm not fighting for the people who've done well in life. I'm fighting for the people who started where I started and who wanted to have an opportunity to live the American dream, who wanted to be able to buy a house, who want to be able to pay their electric bill, who want to be able to afford a car. That's why I'm fighting for people who are truly working hard to try and afford a decent standard of living in this country and in our city. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's what jazzes me up about being the mayor of Vista. That's what gets me excited. That's who I care about. That's what I care about. That is what motivates me every single day. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm taken care of in life. Now I'm trying to give back to help other people to achieve what I've been able to achieve. And I don't live in a multi-million-dollar house and have 2 Ferraris. I got a decent place to live. I'm happy with it. I'm comfortable. And now I want to help other people to achieve what I achieved in Vista. I didn't move to, fabulous places and live great, big, I said, this is a place that I identify with. It reminds me of where I grew up in the world. It's affordable. I bought in Vista. I moved to Vista because I could afford it here. I could afford the American dream in this city. I could afford a beautiful place to live and to retire in, and I just want to protect that, and I want to protect it for the next generations coming behind me. So I care so passionately about. Any other remarks on this item? We do have one public speaker, Jim Rickenbach. You're recognized for 3 minutes.
I guess my first question is, who are you talking to and arguing to? I don't know. But anyway.
Yes, we could ask the same of you.
Earlier, I'm like, am I in a twilight zone here?
Might be.
Earlier, you seemed to insinuate that I was against helping people with severe mental illness, that I don't believe there's people with severe mental illness on the street right now that are not capable. They're going to refuse help. Yes, there are people like that need help. And it would be helpful if a deputy came across somebody like that, if they could force them into treatment. but it's a sensitive topic. I'm not arguing that it's not necessary or might be needed. I don't know where you're getting that from. I think you're making it up because my original comment was when I saw your video, it was insinuating that most people were refusing services because of addiction and mental illness and kind of discounting that there are other reasons too. I was just trying to get clarification on the number. I figured I would see it in the presentation, but didn't. Yeah, the whole conservatorship thing is, my concern is that it's sensitive because you're taking away people's liberty, but it sometimes is necessary. And I know there's families out there right now who have people suffering on the street and they're just devastated because they can't get them help. But the whole system's underfunded. The conservatorship plan is underfunded. In fact, they can't even implement it. Apparently, you've been talking about it for 6 years. Here it is ready to be implemented. There's no money for it. So whose responsibility is that? I started following the council 4 years ago. Not much was happening 4 or 5 years ago. I went back, I've watched a lot of video back to 2015. Nothing was happening back then. It's only been in the last few years that real progress has been made in the city. And it's interesting that a guy whose personal business is to do political strategizing would tell people not to make it political. That's icing on the cake. And I hope your staff got to bed early tonight because they have a lot of editing to do tomorrow. You've got tons of content you delivered tonight. Cut it up and put it on your website. And incidentally, about the point in time count, it is this kind of a strange thing, but I participated 2 or 3 years ago. I do think I remember the woman running and explaining that it's done between 4 and 8 a.m. because that population is not moving around at that time. And the people that are doing the counting can move around, and it's easier to count. And
Thank you very much. We're adjourned.